À toutes et à tous, en tant que puissance invitante, mais pas puissance créatrice, j'imagine, c'est souvent une puissance invitante, je voudrais d'abord vous accueillir dans ces locaux. Ravi que ce sujet passionne, que la salle soit plus que pleine, et je passe la parole maintenant à ceux qui ont imaginé, créé, coordonné.
Monsieur l'envoyé spécial, monsieur le député, mon général, mesdames et messieurs en vos grades et qualités, j'ai le plaisir d'ouvrir cette discussion en français, comme le veut l'usage à l'Assemblée nationale, où l'anglais est normalement proscrit, mais les enjeux internationaux s'invitant de plus en plus dans les débats publics et politiques, la langue de Shakespeare commence à pénétrer le palais Bourbon.
L'anglais.
Merci à toutes et tous d'être présents à cet événement organisé par Eurocreative, think tank français spécialisé sur l'Europe centrale et orientale, PGA, une association ukrainienne visant à renforcer l'administration publique ukrainienne, et la Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, avec le soutien du député Frédéric Petit, vice-président du groupe d'amitié entre la France et l'Ukraine. Donc je me permets de briser l'usage du français et de commencer cette discussion en anglais. When we start working on this conference and its date, we had no idea that French President Emmanuel Macron and President Zelensky would choose the same date to compete with our event. Many of the journalists and diplomats attending our registered preferred the conference organized by the Élysée. We take note of this and believe that these two conferences are decisive for the future of Ukraine. Beyond the humor, it is very important, dear friends, to continue to talk about Ukraine and French and European aid for Ukraine. It is this aid that will be decisive for Ukraine's sovereignty and ours in the coming weeks, both in the military sphere, in the sphere of reconstruction and support for reforms. And to talk about this aid, we have the great honor of welcoming Monsieur l'envoyé spécial, Pierre Heilbronn. Please, the floor is yours.
So thank you very much for welcoming me, and thank you for organizing this event, which indeed is in competition with other meeting in Paris. Now, I have to apologize. I have to leave after this introductory sessions to go to other places in Paris. But this is obviously very timely in many ways, and it's a great way to take stock where we are and what is still needed to continue to support Ukraine in this environment, which is not only challenging but also very unpredictable, leading obviously to questioning a lot of the foundations of our international order, which we know for since the Second World War, and obviously the relativism of the US towards what has happened in Ukraine, putting on the same level Russia and Ukraine, is not only a moral issue, but it's also questioning many of the foundations of our international institutions. When you look at also what happens and what happened in the United Nations General Assembly in the last weeks, and probably it's not the end of the story. Obviously, it forces us Europeans also to think a little bit about our common dreams or common nightmares, which is always a good way to think about our own role and what means Europe. And that has been also leading to an acceleration of reflections in Brussels, in member states, about our own responsibilities, and also what are the attributes of power in an environment which is ours. So beyond rearming the continent, which is something which is probably the top priority of the European Union, we see very well that strengthening our ties with Ukraine as member of the European family, but also a country of opportunity, also strengthen our strategic autonomy as Europe in the world. I will just say a few words in 2 or 3 messages in that context. The first one is very much, it's just to recall, but as you know, many member states and many heads of states are in Paris today to look at the security guarantees and how we can strengthen our support to Ukraine, that Europe and France remain more committed than ever to supporting Ukraine. I will not recall the numbers, even if the numbers are always questioned in places where other numbers are mentioned. But as you know, the EU and the member states have devoted 134 billion euros in the last 3 years, both to humanitarian, military budget support to Ukraine, while the US has devoted 114 billion. It's always good to recall these numbers because these are not the ones which are always the starting point of the discussions in the Oval Office. So it's important to recall that Europe has been the first also to provide a regular and predictable support to Ukraine, also rooting itself in a multi-annual framework, which is quite important in a war and in an environment where time is of the essence. Through different parts, the Ukraine facility of 50 billion euros, which was endorsed by the European Council last February of 2024, but also through the G7 era loans of $50 billion, 18.1 billion of it being disbursed by the European Union based on the Russian assets. Most of it will probably go to the military sector, which will be discussed in the next panel. On the bilateral level, 2025 is quite a key year for us. So our support takes many different shapes. This morning I was in Bercy with some of you, also discussing about and presenting our 200 million euros scheme, which is on civil aid, quite quick disbursement in critical infrastructure. 19 companies have been selected by Ukrainian authorities, very much in key areas where help is needed. Infrastructure, energy, obviously, transport, demining, health. And there are more and more also quite visible projects which are deployed on the ground. One of the last ones, for example, has been this delivery of rail produced in the northeast of France, which is allowing, as we speak, to rebuild 150 kilometers of rail in Ukraine, which have been either destroyed or are in bad shape. This creates, by the way, meets Ukrainian needs, but also it creates jobs in France. I think it's quite important to show that also it's an imperative of solidarity. Obviously, a moral duty, but it leads also for quite a lot of small and medium companies across our country, to seize other opportunities in Ukraine, which will be and is a country of opportunity. I will not go into more details beyond saying that we've been also putting together a toolbox of financial and development instruments, which is now one of the most comprehensive of any country in the world. Obviously, with this fund, with Agence Française de Développement, which has now a mandate and operating, which was not the case before. Obviously, Expertise France is there, Proparco also, and this is completed by also insurance schemes, which are managed by Banque Publique d'Investissement, and which are important elements also to support our companies there. So that's the first message, and I think that's quite an important one about our support. The second one is very much about defense. It has been one of the probably top priority which we devoted attention. As I said, the situation in the stance from our American friends has been a wake-up call also on our vulnerabilities and the fact that we should do much more than we've been doing, and there are many different parts of that. The first one is obviously supporting much more and more quickly the Ukrainian army, which is, by the way, when we talk about security guarantees, the first security guarantee of our continent. As you know, President Macron announced yesterday evening the fact that we would put 2 billion euros additional support in our military aid to Ukraine. And this is obviously also leading to mobilizing more our own industrial base, but also the Ukrainian industrial base in the field of defense. And there is a whole way to go to push for more co-production in Ukraine. Obviously, the defense industry is relatively young in Ukraine, but has been impressively effective and growing in the last 3 years. And it's very important in terms of deterrence to Russia and in terms of defense of the country, that also French and European companies co-produce in Ukraine also new equipment. And President Macron yesterday in the press conference mentioned all the equipments we would look in producing more, but also where joint ventures in Ukraine can bring also additional potential. But also Ukrainian IT companies can bring a lot to France in terms of acceleration of our own rearmament in a way, because there has been impressive creativity, operational innovation from the defense industry of Ukraine, obviously drones, but in other fields, and probably also looking at collaboration from Ukrainian companies in Europe and in France, leading to job creation also in our regions. It's something we should look at in the future. The last message I just wanted to mention is the fact that our cooperation goes much deeper than only that, even if it's already quite an ambitious program, because it is very much linked to the accession of Ukraine to the EU and to the political, cultural, social dimensions of this movement, which we very much supported. As you know, this is obviously this war is an existential threat to Europe, but it is also an existential threat much beyond the military dimension, because it's very much the way our democracies have been built, which are at the root of the European venture and the European projects. So this has many implications, which should also lead us to emphasize the fact that Ukraine is an opportunity for Europe in many ways in terms of strategic autonomy. Obviously, I mentioned military, that's obvious, but also economically, and it's one of the reasons which should push also our companies to be interested in the country. As you know, French companies are the first foreign employers in Ukraine. 30,000 Ukrainians are working in French companies in Ukraine, and there are huge opportunities ahead of that. Obviously, rail, energy will have France and Ukraine will have the two largest networks of our continent in electricity and in rail. Obviously, two large nuclear powers. Obviously, two large also agricultural powers, and also Ukraine, in a way, has a very strong position in being a technological expertise hub for Europe. So this dimension, which sometimes we forget in looking at and watching TV and these scenes of war, is also a very important horizon, a horizon of hope, a horizon of hope also because it pushes us and Ukrainians to build a more creative view about our future, which more or less is rethinking our way of rebuilding a country, of transforming our country in all dimensions, including the architectural dimension, but also offers a lot of hopes also to Ukrainians to have a better future after and during also this very unpredictable and very dire situation, which is the one of the full-scale war, which we are unfortunately Ukrainians are in the middle of for the last 3 years after the Russian aggression. So thank you very much, and I'm sure that the discussion you will have this afternoon will add a lot on the different dimensions, obviously defense one, but also on the reconstruction or more the civil transformation, which is at the core of what we are trying to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monsieur l'Envoyé Spécial. We will show now a video of Seri Soukhomin, Head of State Agency for Reconstruction and Development of Infrastructure of Ukraine.
Доброго дня, мене звуть Сергій Схомин. Я голова Державної агентства відновлення та розвитку інфраструктури України. Я радий привітати учасників конференції 3 роки повномасштабної війни з Росією. Як Франція може посилити підтримку України в секторі безпеки та євроінтеграції? Хочу розповісти про роботу та ключові пріоритети діяльності агентства відновлення. Сьогодні перед агентством стоять дуже великі задачі і виклики. в першу чергу це пов'язано з відновленням об'єктів, які зруйновані в результаті російської агресії. Це і великі малі населені пункти, які мають люди роботи по відновленню. Це інфраструктурні проєкти, це дороги, мости, шляхопроводи. Це захист об'єктів від російських ракет і дронів. Це пункти пропуска на сухопутний кордон, і агентство в своїх пріоритетах має плани повної реконструкції і будівництва нових пунктів пропуска на кордоні з Європейським Союзом. Це будівництво водогонів для забезпечення великої кількості населення України чистою питною водою. В результаті руйнування Каховської ГЕС сотні тисяч людей відрізані від можливості отримувати якісну чисту воду, і сьогодні агентство будує водогон. Я хочу подякувати французьким компаніям, які вже долучилися до відновлення України. Це французька компанія Мат'є, це Енджис, це компанія Суез, які сьогодні разом з нами відпрацьовують проекти для громад по забезпеченню і якісною водою. Сьогодні вже під час війни французький бізнес активно долучається до відновлення і трансформації будівництва нової України. На сьогодні це також проходить шлях трансформації змінної структури. Сьогодні створений центральна закупівельна організація, яка дасть можливість міжнародним компаніям активно приймати участь в відновленні України по зрозумілим для них правилам. Ми всі розуміємо, що без довіри, без активної участі приватного бізнесу відновлення України неможливо, тому ми змінюємося і запрошуємо всіх вас прийняти участь в такому масштабному і амбіційному проєкті, як відновлення України.
And now video of Natalia Halyushina, head of the National Agency of Ukraine on Civil Service.
In the first days of the full-scale invasion by the Russian Federation, we faced, dear colleagues, it is an honor for me to speak before you today. The first thing I want to say is Ukrainians' civil service is about people and for people. We felt this especially acutely in the first days of the full-scale invasion by the Russian Federation. We faced unprecedented challenges, and every Ukrainian civil servant experienced the full depth of their oath to the people of Ukraine. Today, I could share countless stories of Ukrainian civil servants, both men and women who became heroes. They saved lives sometimes and cost on their own. I mention this to provide context for the conditions in which civil servants work and how this influences policy development. Even under martial law, Ukraine's modern civil service has proper its resilience. Civil servants have demonstrated their ability to quickly adapt and operate in an environment of uncertainty. We recognize the challenges and issues we face. These include turbulence, staff turnover, and increasing competition with the private sector for talent. We are working to create proper workplace conditions for people with disabilities and to ensure their adaptation of veterans. Society expects integrity from us. Our response is a reform of the remuneration system. It is the development of the state brand and an employer rethinking of recruitment and selection processes. We have developed and are implementing a strategy for near-term development. Even in conditions of unpredictability, we have a clear goal and a solid understanding of the direction we need to take. We are strengthening cooperation, openness, and transparency in our work and HR procedures. On our path of the European Union, we prioritize the professional development of civil servants. In training, we place special emphasis on enhancing professional competencies related to European integration and improving English language proficiency. Other key priorities include psychological preparedness and adaptation, human rights and freedoms, national resilience, international humanitarian law, and Ukrainians' post-war recovery and development. We are building a civil service that is not only resilient to challenges, but also capable of effective growth by adopting best international practices and innovative approaches. Colleagues, today I turn to you, our partners, with a call to implement joint projects and initiatives. We are open to cooperation because only through dialogue with partners, the expert community, and civil society can we find the best solutions. Please feel free to reach out to us.
And now, Helena Ciepurna and of PGA.
Dear partners, friends, warmest greetings from Ukraine. My name is Helena Ciepurna. I'm head of Professional Garment Association of Ukraine, the NGO that came up with the idea of this conference, and we guarantee that it's the first but not the last in our series of events in Ukraine for you, our friends of Ukraine and French. I will talk in a minute why do we combine reconstruction and public administration and civil service in our videos here, in our presentations and guests. But first of all, I would like to thank you all for your time today. For all who coming from Kyiv, Brussels, Berlin, Paris, of course, and being with us, deeply honored. We really tried our best to make it very meaningful and to give some solutions for all of you to take back to your work and maybe think of other potential projects. And I do feel we won the lottery with the date, actually. 27th, it means that we just made very good strategic decisions way back in January. And to me personally, it feels that we've been through a very turbulent time, the whole world, from January till now on. With the world challenges and the interplay in geopoliticals. But I definitely would like to say for the blue and yellow Eiffel Tower yesterday, that was really something special, and also for very important support of France in reconstruction. I'm from Chernihiv myself, so that is the North City that was under siege. That's how Russians wanted to get to Kyiv. Well, we stood up, we were not taken, but we were really cut down, and our bridge from Kyiv to Chernihiv was damaged, and thank you to France and to Matier, if I pronounce it correctly, company. I'm taking, proudly the bus and thanking France every time I would do it. I really appreciate France's leadership in defense and in frozen assets as well. If you know that Ukraine damage is estimated 500 billion, if I'm not mistaken, there are 300 billion frozen assets, and France is a leader in this, so I really hope the decision there will be taken in the favor of Ukraine. I also love how you tackle the Notre Dame de Paris reconstruction. I think that is what connects us, the whole money collection around it, and I read an intro in 2000 days it took you, so it's, we're in this war for we count it's 11 years, of course, in 2014, so it's 4,000 plus days, but you can feel maybe in this part of the reconstruction, the whole deal about Notre Dame de Paris, you can feel how we feel every time we want to make our country better and to rebuild better. If any of you would like to work with communities you'll see today, please reach out. We're already doing a project on reconstruction in Chernihiv, so there is a lot of need for business investment. Let us know. And in terms of people, so back in 2014, for example, in the midst of Euromaidan revolution, 25 leading associations of international universities like Sorbonne and Oxford, Harvard, Cambridge alumni, we came together with the question of how can we bring this experience better for Ukraine. So we formed Professional Government Association. We unite 3,000 people worldwide. Those are Ukrainians who had foreign degree, who work at maybe some of the companies that Mr. Kharkov mentioned. We basically represent demand from the civil society to empower government for more reforms, for better placement of these reforms, and of course for more professional approach. And we're working with a variety of ministers, with cabinet ministers of Ukraine. We're working with the National Agency of Ukraine on Public Service. You know that today our President is in France with our Minister of National Unity of Ukraine, who are really dealing with Ukrainian diaspora here, so we're also working with them on this one. So this is why we clearly see that people, and when we talk about people behind the reforms, we talk about public administration reform. So we, through our activities, really foster the public administration reform as an essence for any other reconstruction and other efforts. Because if you want people credible doing it, if you want to empower the government, if you want the government to be able to absorb all the European Union accessions, you really need professionals and people there, which they do already have, but they are very much challenged because we know that 4,000 civil servants, they are now joined the army, 5,000 located on the occupied territories, so the civil service really needs our support. And we're working on negotiation clusters. You know that public administration reform is fundamentals. One is opening and closing negotiations, so it's very crucial for this process. And it would be great to have oversight for our government on that and have maybe trilateral cooperation where government and NGOs and European Union would be present together and say. So back to our event in like looking back, for me it's 10 years of definitely commitment, because we are pro bono organization, so we don't pay people for one. It's just based on all the members who voluntarily contribute and organize events like that in free time from their main work, but we would not be able to do it with our partners. So I really wanted to thank our partners today, Dealer Creative, Artur and Roman, for making it together with us. It's our great partners and friends, thank you so much. And also to our main partner, Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, the France office, and also cooperate with German office, with Kyiv-based office, Konrad Adenauer Stiftung. They support the URC. Berlin side event last year, they're doing amazing Cafe Kyiv. If you know about that, it's the largest Ukrainian-based event. I think it was 4,000 people this year, so really great. Thank you so much. And of course, I want to thank my PJ friends. Club here, it's our hub, Helen, Olena, and Ludmila. These are two young, wonderful ladies who actually organized this conference together with Artur and Roman. So, very thankful to them. And without further ado, just wanted to stress again that please feel free to reach out to us if you need any information, if you need direct connections, because we do have to depict them to the people, and we can provide the format where you, even without being present in Ukraine, would feel that you know the community or the business you invest in it. We would really make sure that you are guaranteed to understand the partners you work with. So thank you for that, and I will pass the floor to Artur or the Roman.
Thank you very much. Hello everyone, nice to see you. To see you all here. We are very proud. Thank you, Mr. Deputy, for hosting us here at the National Assembly. I would like to welcome the first speakers from the first panels. Please have a seat and join me. Nice to see you all. Welcome. Thank you very much for being here. As you can see, there has been a change. I'm not Isabelle Lasserre, famous journalist from Le Figaro. Unfortunately, she had to work today and to work on very important stuff, as you all know. President Zelensky is here. A lot of many heads of states are here as well. So she had, unfortunately, to cancel and to cover for Le Figaro. And she just published an interview with President Zelensky that I invite you all to read. Unfortunately for you, this is only me, Romain Lequignoux, Managing Director of Eurocreative. I'm very happy to be here, and we are very happy to cooperate with PEGA and with CAS for this event. Thank you all for being here. And welcome to this first panel, which is named Ramping Up Military Support for Ukraine and Geopolitical Perspectives of the Future of Ukraine. I will try to summarize just a bit, but I think that, I don't need to speak too much about this. We know that it's a very important moment today. We know that especially these dates are very important. Yesterday we saw and we watched all an interview and a press conference between President Zelensky and President Macron where important things have been announced, and we hope that it will transform into concrete help in the coming weeks, in the coming months, and will have great effect for Ukraine on the field. This is also today a very important summit with the heads of states of many member states of the European Union, and not only, and this is important to mention. Why? Because there is a geopolitical turn in Europe these days. As I said, there are a lot and many changes occurring right now in Europe, in the international scene. One of the most important tendency, of course, is the behavior of our partners and allies, the United States. And the current administration, the return of Donald Trump has been consequential. We've seen new attitudes from Washington, we've seen change of behavior, and now we can ask ourselves a lot of questions about the behavior of this administration and the true objectives that they are following today by re-engaging with the Kremlin. Because it's not just, not leaving Ukraine and Europe at the table. They are trying to re-engage with the Kremlin. And it, of course, has consequences, and the first is what consequences on the transatlantic relations. What is the future of NATO? We know that the summit should happen in the summer. Will we go to The Hague and have this summit? This is not sure yet. But still, today we need to find solutions together for European security, and Europeans have the key. Europeans meaning European member states, EU member states, and Europeans, Ukraine, the United Kingdom, and our allies. Finally, on this, Ukraine and the Europeans have a problem, which is that we are today not at the seat of the table, not at the seat for the negotiations. And this is a huge problem for all of us. We cannot leave external actors to decide on our own security, to decide on the future of Ukraine. So this is our duty today to have a solution for this and us to talk about this. Second point, very quickly, war in Ukraine. It has been said already in the introduction. War in Ukraine is not just in Ukraine. It is about Europe, not only about Ukraine. Of course, Ukraine pays the price, and we are all seeing this. We've seen that not for 3 years, but for 11 years, and this is something to remind here in France. But this is about Europe, this is about European security. And last but not least, there is a moment for Europe, for European defense. And this is where we have to talk, and this is the objective of this panel, talk of two things. The security for Ukraine, what can we provide, what can we put on the table? And second, how can we together, collectively, reinforce European security? I've been already too long, and I think that someone is much better than me to talk about this thing and to frame the discussion, and we have the great pleasure to have a video from the former Minister of Defense and today Director of the Ukraine Center for Defense Strategy, Andrei Zakhorvennyuk.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for inviting me to speak at this conference. We're talking at very difficult times right now, because the European security architecture is pretty much damaged with the new developments. We clearly see intensified Russian aggression, we clearly see the intensified rhetoric. We clearly see that the fact that they don't consider themselves as losing anymore, and they're actually trying to use the political and information and military pressure in order to get as much out of this as possible. And clearly then their strategies are not changed. We see also the incredibly difficult position which we need to deal with the United States, as the US administration, because they have unprecedented changes in the policy towards Europe and towards Ukraine. It's quite tough to deal with that, and we all know that we need to be strong and we need to stand together, because that's the only way to survive. Russia is clearly planning to use that opportunity right now. They're planning to increase pressure on all fronts, and kinetic fronts, and information warfare, political pressure, and so on. There is no yet clarity about the ceasefire, whether this is going to happen, if it will be having a clear protection mechanisms, because the peace is as strong as it's protected, and we don't know yet what scenario will play out. We need to be ready for all scenarios, including the scenario when there is no ceasefire, and including when there is one, but we need to ensure that the second phase of the war never starts. We have to understand that it's probably a time to develop a very specific operational plans and a very specific participation of different militaries in this defense. There are questions about efficiency of certain measures. There are questions of efficiency, for instance, of the boots on the ground, as they call them. And we do believe that we need, first of all, to look at the air domain. Why? Because air domain will clearly define the winner of the next phase of the war. We cannot ignore air domain anymore. We cannot fill it with the, let's say, non-competitive aircrafts. We need to look at the very strong system of defending the airspace against Russian invasion, because Russia will try to control it next time. And there are different suggestions about that. For example, there is a very compelling proposal of the Sky Shield over Ukraine. There are discussions about unmanned systems, which clearly can take a certain part of the problem, and they are redefining a whole battlefield right now with new concepts of operations. We clearly should be looking at that. And even if the UAVs and drones are changing the nature of the war, there is no single kind of a magic solution. It still has to be a combined arms approach, and there has still to be a conventional air power involved. And only by bringing the best technologies possible to the front, we can have an asymmetric advantage, which will then make these deterrence of Russian massive army possible. We believe that if Russia manages to agree about the relief of some sanctions, they will not spend the money on the demilitarization of their economy. They will still keep a militarized economy, and they will still keep arming, and they will recover, and they will bring quite a substantial force. This force could be even bigger than they had before, and it could be bigger than they ever had before. Deterring that force would be extremely difficult, and it requires critical components of deterrence, such as credibility, capability, and communication. So they have to be all combined, and Putin needs to understand that he's going to fail, and that understanding is the only thing which will prevent us from having another phase of the war, which could be more dramatic and more tragic than this one. At the same time, we realize that this has only to be deterrence by denial. We cannot create a deterrence by punishment, because clearly Russians have a very serious tolerance for the losses. So we need to be thinking how to create an absolute probability of the failure of Russian invasions, that they don't even think about starting this again. And that has to be covering the whole eastern frontier of Europe. Clearly Ukraine is obviously a special case, taking into account the current events in the current war, but we cannot think that Russia will not look at the other parts of Europe, particularly since the United States position is so unclear about that. So all these has to be discussed and has to be defined among specialists, and we welcome all contributions, and of course Ukraine would immensely appreciate the support from France, for support from other European nations, and I wish you have a very good event today. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your patience, and now I have the great honor to welcome our members of the panel, our distinguished speakers, and first is Monsieur le Député Frédéric Petit. You are a member of the French Parliament from the 7th constituency of the Français de l'étranger, so it covers Central Europe, Eastern Europe, as well as Germany, and you have been one of the leading voices when it comes to Ukraine, but also Belarus, and we are very happy to have you today, and thank you very much for welcoming us. We have also on his right General Nicolas Richoux from the 7th Armored Brigade, an ex-defense attaché from the French Embassy in Germany, in Berlin. We have also on his right Gallagher Fenwick. You are a grand reporter and the former head of English-speaking France 24. And last but not least with us today, Anastasia Sapochkina, and you are the president of Eastern Circles, a think tank that has been extremely active on Ukraine, and thank you for being here as well. We will have a last video on this panel, which is from Yaroslav Rajniuk, who is the founder of drone production company, The Fourth Law. First, I would like to start this discussion by talking about the current state of affairs, and I would like to turn the first question to Monsieur le Député and to ask you basically about this European momentum. We see that the situation in Europe is more and more complex, especially given the situation in Washington, and we see that Europeans try to come together and find solutions for European security. How do you see it? Do you believe in this momentum for European defense, for European security? And what is the position of France? We know that President Macron has been leading this effort. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for all coming here. Thank you for the class. I have also Germany in the constituency. You know, I'm elected by diaspora. We have this system in France, and I'm living in Krakow, in Poland, since decades. I used to work in Ukraine. I am a French people abroad, representing French people abroad. But I am representing all of France, of course. I prepared myself to this question. Do we have a European movement or a European momentum? I'm sometimes saying that I'm too old to be pessimistic, and I will try to counter this first approach to this idea by something that I think in this room we all know. Yes, there is a political moment for Europe, but it's not the first one, and we have to inscribe this history, this momentum, in a very long history. And very often I'm saying that this history didn't begin just after the Second War. We had something in Ukraine, in Lithuania, which was called Republic of the Two Nations, with 4 languages, 4 religions. Vilnius was the capital. We have something in the Balkan, which was called Republic de Vojvodina. It means this idea that we have no big brother. There is no grand frère soviétique. We have no big brother. We are different, but we want to live together without big brother. With the little, with the big one. Okay? With the Serbian coming with their weapons, and with the Romans working in the field. This idea is our idea, from Brest to Lugansk. That is, I think that we have to inscribe the momentum in this momentum that we have today in this very long history, in order to come back to what, to be able to resist to all the narration we have. Okay? We have a former president of the French Republic who wrote, not only said, who wrote that Crimea was always Russia till 1954. Okay, my answer is yes, and Algeria was, well, Crimea is Russia as exactly in the same period that Algeria was French. Okay, 30 years difference. I think we have to be sure of our history, not only our history as the European Union, which is actually the best form that we found to solve this kind of family dispute, but this history comes from very long in the history and was always aggressed by the imperialists, by the people who said, I am the big brother, you are speaking Russian, your parents were speaking Russian, then I am the boss. No, we have to inscribe that. And why do I say that? Because I think in this momentum, and especially today, where we, for the first time, it's very technical, but it's very important. We have a meeting, a political meeting today, and we have a different staff meeting. It means that we are beginning to have political decision and a staff decision, military staff decision. We said, okay, we have a common, we have something to do. We don't know exactly what they have now. Actually, I agree with them. But the first time that we have these two separate things, but if you want to defend yourself, you don't need only to have weapons, only to have a big army, or to have the Russian tactic, I have more than you, then I will win, whatever people die. But what you need, it's a mobilization of a society, a mobilization of an idea, mobilization around what we are and what we want to be for our children and so on. And I think that I feel that yes, we have now this momentum. And I would add also another thing which is coming from the recent history now, that the full invasion was not the first aggression and was not the last one. The first aggression was in 2020 in Belarus, to Poland. You had now aggression in Finland. Also with migrants. It's exactly, you have aggression in Paris with the hybrid war. And I think that we have to understand that we have to put our society, and I am feeling that in France, at least in France, also in the parliament, we have this kind of momentum, that we are not only feeling and discussing about how many weapons, how many millions, and so on, but we are also discussing about something which is a kind of mobilization, I would say, mobilization. And this mobilization is connected with something very important, which is reality, truth. And I would say only one word about the change in America. I'm very afraid that not by what we see, by the political decision, absolute political decision, but I think that we have something, we have an administration who is not knowing what she's doing. And that's, for me, the problem of the truth, the problem of the reality. I am feeling that my colleagues here, my society here, I'm a lot traveling, not only home and in Ukraine and so on, but I'm also traveling in France. I am feeling that the society is beginning to understand and to come to the reality. When we are talking about children, there is no doubt. People are understanding what we are talking about. When we are talking about children, when we are talking about Chernihiv, when we are talking about the Chernihiv, because there are still aggression very often in Chernihiv. I think that people are understanding, and if I can say, I think it's, yes, we can say that it's a moment, and not only in France. In Germany we had, I think, a serious campaign, Ernst, as they said, about this issue. We have even the case in Italy. We have a member of the Italian parliament who proposed that we can now ratify the defense treaty, the defense European treaty from '65 that we didn't ratify. He was proposing that we can ratify now, which was a joke, but I think that we are understanding that it's whole the society who is engaged defending our values, and that our values are now seen and concrete. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur le Député. Mon général, j'aimerais, I would like to come back to this idea of sense of reality from the society, because this is also something we've been discussing over the past few months, and I remember a bit more than a year ago when President Macron discussed potential boots on the ground, and the reaction were afraid, fear that we are going maybe to a war, what is going on, etc., etc. And a lot has been said over the past few months, and we are back also with this idea of peacekeeping mission. And I would like to ask you more about the operational, on the field realization of this potential idea. Is it concrete? Is it operational or not? Are we discussing also other type of possibility? Because we know that yesterday from the press conference we were talking also about Ukrainian army and the strategic reserve. So how does it? What is the situation on the ground and our possibility to help Ukraine?
Okay. Thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy to be with you today to speak about Ukraine. The military problem is not that simple in the EU because, as you know, we come from very far away. EU has been built at the beginning as an economic union and not as a military or political power. Military economic union we are, and we are very strong because we have already delivered 130 billion euro for Ukraine, more than the United States. That means that we are really today an economic power, a world economic power, but not a military power. And that's the issue we have today because we have to be stronger, to work together to help Ukraine and to make Europe stronger regarding the big issues we have with Russia of Vladimir Putin. Power, a pillar since Maastricht Treaty in 1994, we have a little military pillar, but that's not enough because the defense basically in Europe remains a national privilege. That means we have 27 armies and not one single army. We have not one political leader, we have 27 political leaders. We have the rule of unanimity, and you know that some people, some leaders such as Hungary or Slovakia are not that simple to manage today. That's a very problem for us. The first problem for Europe is to get a political will. That means, what do we want? Where do we want to go? What's the goal of Europe? What's the dream we have? What dream we have together? Do we want to remain a space of economic exchange, or do we want to be tomorrow a world and a political and military power to be able to face the other big ensembles such as India, Russia, China. That's a big issue. So we have a lot to do to reach that target. And I'm afraid from time to time, because I have a lot of work with a European nation in my long career, I'm afraid that not all nations share this dream of united Europe, because it seems to be a French dream, but it's not shared everywhere. So some nations just want to economic space, just want to live in peace. But NATO remains basically the provider of security for a lot of people today. It can change with Trump, but NATO remains the security provider. That means if we intervene in Ukraine tomorrow, I don't think that EU as EU can be the leader of that. We will have a coalition of volunteers, of nations, volunteer to take part in this project. So it's a multilateral military operation, better than EU operations. In this ensemble, we must cooperate with UK, of course, because UK is one of the most powerful armies in Europe. That's very important. So I think perhaps we can get 6, 8, 10 nations but certainly not the 27 nations. Perhaps such nations as Norwegian, which isn't part in EU but is part of NATO, could take part in. I hope that big nations like Germany, with a representative of the German embassy here, will take part in this project too. I hope so. But Poland, probably, Baltic states, certainly, but not the 27 member states of EU, unfortunately. That means, moreover, we must take into account that we have limited means and capabilities because of the military choices that have been made in the past 30 years. Budget cuts, small armed forces, made for limited expansionary operations. For example, today in France we just have 220 tanks about, whereas when I was a young soldier we had more than 1,000 tanks. And in Germany, only 2,000, I think, when I was a young soldier for 40 years ago. In France, 76 pieces of artillery, and we are one of the biggest and best armed and trained forces in Europe. So you see what we have to do. Moreover, we have a limited combat readiness for high intensity fighting and little experience on that type of combat. That means tank fighting since World War II. The challenges in the past 30 years were quite different. We made the job, we have a good army, but now that's quite different. We must prepare to high intensity fighting. And that's the reason why, fortunately, the EU has got a plan to rearm Europe. 800 billion euro. We are an economic power. But now, what are we going to do with 800 billion euro? So, I think in Ukraine we have 4 possibilities. The first possibility is a peacekeeping operation. Peacekeeping operation, it seems to be a reasonable solution, but it's for me a false good idea. Because, first of all, in that context, we need Russian acceptance and authorizations, and we know it's a no way for Russians. It's a no way. They wanted to see any so-called NATO boots on the ground. And if Russia doesn't accept, it seems to be impossible to get any UN resolution from the Security Council because of presence of Russia. And so, what the caveat will be in that context? It's rather impossible to have a strong mandate. Impossible. Which means capabilities. How many soldiers are we going to mobilize for this purpose? With other nations, China, for example, or Korea, or whatever, Pakistan, that's big programs. Furthermore, in France, we have a big problem with the UN peacekeeping operation. As we remember, we had a bad experience in 1995 with the French soldiers which were chained on the bridge of Verbania in Bosnia. And then the President Chirac decided to intervene, but under a national flag. And today we intervene in coalition under national flag, always with French leadership, a French chain of command, but not under UN command, that means not under the command of the DPKO, the Department of Peacekeeping Operation, because it's that DPKO which in 1995 was responsible for the disaster in Bosnia. So, and the good example of peacekeeping operation in the FINUL in Lebanon. So we have a force, well trained and everything, but with a weak mandate. It's impossible to do anything. So we can just cook and have a look at what happens between the belligerents, but it's difficult, it's almost impossible to intervene. So I think that any kind of peacekeeping operation must be held on national command with a mandate, but which mandate? So I'm not sure that it's first realistic and efficient for the problem of that Ukraine faces. The second possibility will be the peace enforcement, but that's more difficult, more and more difficult. See, if you can not get a peacekeeping operation, how can you get a peace enforcement operation? And in peace enforcement operation, you will be considered co-belligerent. That's a big issue. Who will take the command? That's a second issue. And for peace enforcement, you need very strong and numerous force to be able to, with full spectrum of capabilities, and to be able to intervene in case something happens, and a very strong political will too. So where does this political will comes from? So it seems that the second solution is unrealizable for the moment. The first possibility will be to deploy the forces in support of Ukraine. That's what the president spoke of that. That means we don't need the acceptance of Russia. Well, we don't need it because if we are invaded by Ukraine, we can put soldiers on the ground, boots on the ground. But it means to deploy our armies, and it is inconvenient that there is of escalation to be considered belligerent. And as for peacekeeping enforcement, you need a very strong force. And what will be the purpose of that mission? Only training, fighting in case of? Well, I remember that we have already trained 70,000 soldiers in EU and more than 30,000 in UK. So we know how to do that outside the borders of Ukraine. But it will be a political, it would show the political will of European nations and provide the conditions of security that require, the guarantee of security required by Ukraine in that critical context. The fourth possibility, shortly, will be the air support. And the air support is meant to create and impose a no-fly zone. So, but practically, if you impose a no-fly zone, it will be against Russia. And such an option will create a lot of issues. Of course, it means the possibility to shoot down a Russian plane. That means you become co-belligerent. And we don't want that. It's my analysis. I don't think that we don't want to become co-belligerent. That means, according to you, it's not very credible. So, to conclude, I would say that the third possibility would be probably the good choice would be to deploy a force in support to Ukraine, force on the ground, just to deter Russia, to provide security guarantee for Ukraine, and to prevent Russia, after a ceasefire, after 30 days, or after 6 months, or after 2 years, to attack again further west, and to deter Vladimir Putin to take any action against Ukraine and French forces. So, thank you for your attention.
Merci mon général. You mentioned a few possibilities, concrete possibilities on the ground. At the same time, you mentioned this new rearm plan from Europe. And I would like to ask Gallagher, basically, how does he feel about the momentum at the European level? Monsieur le Député said that there is a sense of momentum among the population. What about the institutions? Is there also the French momentum in Europe that, finally this vision of European strategic autonomy, of renewal of the European security architecture is coming to a reality? Do you feel that?
Thank you, Romain. Thank you, Euro Creative, for the invitation. Thank you to the National Assembly for hosting this event. Thank you to you, Monsieur le Député, my colleagues on the panel, and thank you to you, friends and neighbors, for attending. Before I directly answer your question, I just wanted to frame it because I think that the context which brings us together today still has, at least in my mind, somewhat of a stunning, if not stinging, quality to it. And I can almost feel it in this room, in the sense that I think it's time that we acknowledge that we're confronted to two simultaneous challenges. One that comes from the East, obviously, its name is Putin, but also one that comes from the West, and its name is Trump. And that basically means that we as Europeans, and I obviously include Ukrainians in that category, are caught between a bloodthirsty ex-KGB agent who thinks that he can grab whatever he wants, and that simply costs hundreds of thousands of lives, including lives of his own countrymen and women. And on the other hand, we have a real estate mogul from Queens who also happens to think at present that he can grab what he wants simply because, well, he can, because he's more powerful than anyone out there, or so he thinks. And he also thinks that America has been made to pay for security around the world, in Europe, but in other parts as well. And the best way to make freeloaders pay is by also grabbing some of what happens to be theirs, resources, or worse yet, to call on the so-called freeloaders, adversaries and enemies to attack them, because that's a way to teach them a lesson. So in less metaphorical terms, we as Europeans are caught between, I think, the end or the death of Pax Americana on one hand, and the continuation of Putin's policy of invasion and again bloody aggression. And that means that we now have to keep eyes, and it's particularly true today as I speak, at the exact same time on Narva in Estonia and Nuuk in Greenland, the capital of Greenland, at the exact same time. And circle back to your question, Romain, that's the moment when Ursula von der Leyen slams a white paper on the table, calls it European Defense Readiness 2030, or for marketing purposes, Rearm Europe. And I think the way I went through it, and I read it as a sort of eulogy, precisely as we stand over the freshly dug out grave of Pax Americana, we realize that it is time to sort of collectively bury this idea that America would be an eternally reliable guarantor of security. And when I go through the chronology of how Pax Americana came to die under our eyes, there are plenty of different moments, but a couple of them recently, I think, struck our collective, at least I should speak for myself, my imagination. I think the first bullet actually went to the head, and it happened exactly a month ago to the date when the US Vice President J.D. Vance stood up at the podium of the Munich Security Conference and looked at some of us in the eyes and explained that the problem is not China, the problem is not Russia, we are the problem. Put aside the fact that his argument is centered on the issue of free speech, and in his mind there's more free speech in Beijing and Moscow than there is in Paris, Berlin, or other European cities. That was a blow to the head. And the second blow, I think, went to the heart. And that was 2 weeks later, and that was in the Oval Office when the US President, for about an hour, flanked by his Secretary of State, J.D. Vance, his US Vice President, and other characters, told Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, and I quote, that he doesn't have cards in his hands, and that, and I quote again, it's going to be very difficult to do business with this kind of an attitude, as if Zelensky was in town for a simple business transaction. Which, in Donald Trump's mind, he actually is, because in, I think it was the East Room, so just a few hundred meters away from the Oval, there was a table set up with US flags, Ukrainian flags, folders, for a middle's deal that was supposed to be signed on that day and did not get signed on that day. And I think, these two moments, at least in my mind, are major alarm bells, and they translate again in the death. The painful agony of Pax Americana, its concept and its implications. And 2 weeks after that Oval Office, March 19th, is when, so that white paper, European white paper, was presented. And as is usually the case with these, European announcements, at first they're difficult to digest and understand. But what the public was meant to sort of retain from this moment was a historical and very sizable shift to the tune of hundreds of billions of euros, with a somewhat complex mechanism embedded in it, so-called safe instruments that allows for member states to borrow from a fund of about 150 billion euros, which would be put together after raising money on markets and then loaning it out with low-interest long-term rates. And then hundreds of other billions of euros being made available through fiscal mechanisms, basically activating an escape clause vis-a-vis the Growth and Stability Pact, meaning that defense spendings within certain limits by member states would not be counted or calculated in countries' deficits. And it has to be acknowledged, that is a major shift. And you didn't mention Romain, but that is, in my mind, to be put in parallel to, equally stunning decisions being made, not too far from where we're sitting right here, which is in Germany, where Germans also decided, and very quickly, as soon as elections have been held, to vote a law that would allow them to give up on the so-called and constitutionally enshrined, so this is historical, this is major, so-called debt break, in order to establish mechanisms similar to the ones that I just described, which would allow defense spending to not be taken into account in terms of calculating the country's deficit. And this had to be done very, very quickly because there needed to be a sizable majority in Parliament in order to pass this. And with the advent, and this is something that we all have to have in the back of our minds as we look at the very near future, AfD, the far-right party in Germany, made sizable gains. And the far left did as well. And oddly enough, these two, two opposite ends of the political spectrum, see eye to eye on this idea that this was not a good law and this is not a good idea because in their minds, we're just making future generations pay for what they consider to be mistakes. And I think that Friedrich Merz was able to bring the Green on board as well by reminding us all that this doesn't mean giving up on other major challenges that we're currently being confronted to, one of them being the environmental challenge, that doesn't magically disappear simply because Trump acts up and Putin keeps on acting. I really appreciated what General Michaud was just describing, because I think that we Europeans, and us French in particular, are very, very good when it comes to coming up with every single problem and hindrance which could prevent us from accomplishing what I believe we're very capable of accomplishing. I think the beauty of European democracy is that we're very good at doubting ourselves. But after doubt needs to come decision. And so I'm on board with General Michaud when it comes to sort of naming all of the potential obstacles that lie ahead. But I perceive that exercise, acknowledging those obstacles as being the very first step to overcoming those obstacles. If you don't identify and name obstacles, you're lying to yourself and you're making it very difficult to either jump over or duck under the hurdles lying ahead. I think the very first one, and please interrupt me if I'm being too wrong, Romain, the very first one, and General Michaud, when he counted the number of tanks that we have in France, active tanks, 200, pointed to we have low stockpiles, and our military production capacity is incredibly low at this point. And so speeding that up is going to be incredibly complicated because transforming industry is never a quick process.
Actually, this is where I can stop you and
Perfect.
can bring Anastasia in, because Ukraine has proved adaptability when it comes to defense industry, and also being able, despite being under the state of war, of bringing innovation also in this field. So can you let us know how does it look like from Ukraine on the defense industry adaptability?
Thank you. This problematic and really discussion centered very spontaneously on the US. And one big takeaway from me, which I'd like to share with you to start with, is of course the announcement by the US that they are withdrawing from NATO command. Well, the takeaway from me was not the announcement. The takeaway from me was that what it means, and I didn't really grasp when I read this in the newspaper, that then this workshop helped me understand that de facto means that the nuclear deterrence is over. And therefore, when we're talking about, what is Europe about, etc., to me, this departure of the US and leaves Europe no longer in this domain where we are seeing ourselves every time we discuss Ukraine. Like there is Ukraine, and there is Russia, and war, and then there is Europe, and then there is France, of course, as well, and therefore it's separate. The departure of the US and the announced departure, right, from the NATO command, only from the NATO command, really leaves us kind of naked and puts us in the same category as Ukraine in terms of being really naked in terms of defense. And deterrence, at least, right, deterrence. Now, that erases that time when we had before, maybe, when we had to think about what are we fighting for, what is Europe, what are European values. All of this is no longer relevant. It's over. That thinking is over. We are going to forever remain wherever we are today with those answers, each of us individually. It doesn't matter anymore. What matters is, for example, if in your neighborhood a new school is being built, here in the Paris region, like it is built in my neighborhood. And I was in the Paris committee, and in the last 3 years it never occurred to any one of the committee members to wonder, throughout following that school construction, whether there was a basement, to say nothing of a shelter. A question that the Polish government is now making paramount and integrated into the building code. We have now, with the white paper, I completely join Gallagher what he said, such an interesting strategy of the European defense policymakers to announce the date when we're going to be ready, God's willing, with the 650 billion out of 800 billion not being new money, right? But the money, as you rightly explained, which the states have to find somewhere in their deep coffers, and then each state, according to whatever the decision making, France being one of the biggest states from which a bit more is expected. We've already seen how it played out last Thursday during the council meeting when France and Italy had walked out, refusing and explaining to everybody that they are able to find together even 5 billion, to say nothing of hundreds. The borrowing, we don't know how of the remaining 150 billion. Let's remind ourselves, we don't know how exactly it's going to go. Everybody talked about the European Investment Bank. We don't even know if it's going to be the EIB in the end. But that's just a footnote. What I want to say is that without the nuclear deterrent, and with the vision when we are setting a date, 2030, on something that we have no control over, because if you are a victim, you are not going to dictate to the aggressor when to become aggressive. You are just going to actually be subject to aggression, and you're not going to be choosing the date. So the only choice we have in this situation is to prepare for war. Just to prepare for war. For war as we have read about in the books. Conventional war. Because when we're talking, and it's very good and nice to think that we are behind the nuclear shield, please anybody explain me, even if Macron once, for example, is confronted with a physical threat and wants to use a nuclear bomb, when, for example, Russians are crossing in Narva or something along these lines, when exactly does he push the button? And where does he shoot? He aims at Moscow when Russia crosses at Narva, he aims at Estonia, or he preemptively strikes Germany. What are the choices? I can't figure it out. And then the other takeaway for me was kind of more surprising, kind of a question I'd like to share from this workshop, which really is pertaining to this discussion, is about this role of Europe in the negotiations. We weren't invited to the negotiations between the US and Russia. What a pity, how come we're not invited? And one of the most striking questions for me was, well, you know what? We don't even know where the table is. Okay, I know where the table is, and the table is surprisingly not in the UAE. The table is in Kyiv. In the circumstance in which we're finding ourselves now, when obviously nobody's going to invite us to any negotiations, we can't even find the 4 or 5 billion euros on a Thursday afternoon. We have to really think about who can we ally with in order to be able to prepare for war rather sooner than later, something that the general has very well underlined. With the limited military capacities that European countries have. And thank you very much for giving the examples of France, but unfortunately, as you said, France is the best example. It's like the best student in class. Now, instead of the boots on the ground, and this is now turning to the first question, right, about what are, for example, the needs on which the cooperation is needed today by Ukraine the most. Not because Ukrainians are complete zeros in it, but because that's where now it's playing out. That's what the so-called peace negotiations, whatever, depend on, right? And first is this boots on the ground, of course, is great. However, it's really planes in the air. And I understand that argument that you just covered. Thank you very much, General Michaud, for covering that. That there is that risk of shooting down a Russian plane. However, since Ukrainians have been effectively able to close their sky as well, for Russian planes, not for Russian missiles, but for Russian planes, that risk today on the territory of Ukraine is driven down to zero. Russian planes today cannot penetrate the territory of Ukraine, bringing down that risk really to the lowest. Now, the planes in the air instead of the boots on the ground, first thing, so the air defense. They are French Mirages, something that Macron promised actually in his speech 1 year ago, and which was overlooked. They were delivered now, from what I understand, and that's a very good first step, especially since, in the words of one of the Norwegian military, what a lot of the countries in Europe seem to have acquired in the shape of F-35 is a $1 billion paperweight. So Mirages become even more, or whatever, Rafales or whatever, becomes even more relevant in this circumstance. And France happens to be one of the few countries which are capable to produce any planes at all. So now stepping up on that front is very important. Missiles, second most important addition to the air defense, and air defense includes missiles, it doesn't only include missiles, but also includes missiles, including future ballistic missiles. There Ukraine has shown since last August important progress in production. So right, they announced Paladisa production, which is a long-range missile. However, we're talking about scaling. For scaling, there is not enough money in Ukraine, and the argument of the big French DIFTAC, which is Ukraine presents a competitive danger, is no longer valid for a simple reason that Ukrainians, so the argument goes, you open exports, and lo and behold, we're going to be overwhelmed with cheaper, even if it is a little bit more simple technology, but kind of able to do the same thing. That argument is no longer valid for the simple reason that all of the Ukrainian companies, which are more or less entrepreneurial, they are already based in Europe. They are all going to be competing with you, with your companies, in the European Defense Fund with no problem whatsoever. The Ukrainian best military experts are already poached by the European companies run by Americans and UK people. okay, like the missile-producing company in Estonia, of all places. Right? To give out just one example, that company was able to raise on the markets, and I'm talking about private capital, $650 million. And that was like 6 months ago. So Ukraine is not going to be your competitor because it already is in Europe. So there is no fear of really entering there. So air defense systems and anti-drone systems, missiles, gliding bombs, third area, very important, really underlined. One gliding bomb, just in case, I wouldn't really visualize it, because for me it was important when people were explaining this to me some time ago, why this is important, right, the gliding bomb. A gliding bomb is this thing which can fly for like 100 kilometers or more, and it can carry 500 to 1,000 kilogram explosive. And it aims at trenches. So well before, in the first year and a half, you were talking about artillery fire in trenches. And the artillery fire, you could still kind of survive. Well, when a 500 kilogram gliding bomb lands in a trench, it just evaporates the whole trench. It just kind of, so there, Ukrainians really need cooperation. They have already developed their own gliding bombs. France has announced very newest models of gliding bombs, and a lot of NATO countries who develop bombs, they have developed gliding bombs. Obviously, shells, artillery shells, very important Czech initiative, and also cooperation along the production line and the supply chain, including on the gunpowder, right, which Ukraine has an ambition to produce itself. In order to make artillery shells and to increase the number of artillery shells, and believe me, there's not going to be a lot of them, there's not going to be too much artillery shells. It's not going to be enough, especially if we need to scale up within Europe. We are interested in having them doing that too. Obviously, chips, which are key for navigation systems, including in missiles, and the and chip producing, and artificial intelligence, which is key for autonomous bombing, right, including by heavy bombers. There is cooperation on demining. There is also important to increase cooperation on mining, right, including smart mining, and on drone carriers. And that is true not just for air, but also for naval drones and for terrestrial drones. The vertically along the supply chain, it's important to increase cooperation on autonomy. We have realized in Europe, we realized the dependence of the United States in Ukraine, and then everybody who deals with drones of any kind. It's also the dependence on China, and together we can overcome that. There are companies in Europe who aspire to autonomy in production, in Ukraine as well. And finally, on capital. So again, we have just covered the numbers. I want just to give another number, an estimated number that was shared by the next speaker, Yaroslav Azhnuk, of the total investment in Ukrainian private defense technology startups and small and medium-sized companies in the first 3 years of war. Yaroslav Azhnuk estimated at $25 million, which is something he compared to what he was able to raise with his company, which was producing like pet toys, 10 years ago. So this is something where we do need not just government participation, not government loans, not government grants, but also joint ventures, private capital investment, and private companies cooperation, defense technology companies cooperation. And all of that is because it's only us we have now. And I think everybody understands that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just say, be involved in all this. We are running behind of the schedule, and we will play the video during the break. But I would like, before to open the questions and try to finish in the next 10-12 minutes, just to have 30 seconds per speaker and to conclude on the most important idea that we need. What can we offer to Ukraine for the security guarantees when it comes to the coming time? And what does it mean to support Ukraine today? And I would like to start with Monsieur Petit. Monsieur Deputy.
I think we need person. We talk about civil agents, civil servants. I think we need people on place, not only military, but also we have to go there. We have to go there to help civil servants. I think it's not only for me, but I think we are home there. We are home, and we have to make this these ties between societies, which are already, there are French people living there since decades. And I think that's, for me, it's the most important, of course, in the military area, but not only.
Resilience of our societies, general.
For me, the most important thing we have to do now is to continue our strong economic support. Because, as I told you, we delivered already 130 billion euros, so we must continue to financially help Ukraine. And especially if the US will withdraw with Donald Trump. And perhaps we have to raise the question to get a war economy in France, because for the time being, we have no war economy. Our chain of production of factories don't provide enough shells, missiles, and so on and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to develop now our military industrial capabilities, and that's the purpose of the 800 billion euros delivered by EU to help national industries to rise their capabilities.
Thank you very much. Gallagher?
Just one sentence. We, for decades, have been security consumers. We now urgently need to become security providers. And this no longer is a luxury, it's an absolute necessity.
Anastasia?
Since everybody's talking about what they can contribute to Ukraine, I want to say what Ukraine can contribute in case the cooperation is serious. The things that really the EU doesn't have right now is the reverse engineering of the latest Russian technology, which is the only foundation for relevant defense technology innovation that can exist today. If you're inventing something today which has not connected to what the Russians have come up with 2 weeks ago, then you're just wasting your money. The second is the return experience or feedback about Western technology which has been supplied to Ukraine. A lot of it doesn't work, and that feedback has to be institutionalized. And then 3 more things that Ukraine can bring is the production capacity, and that already has the speed. It doesn't need to increase the speed, it already has the speed. It can also bring that production capacity at much lower cost. And finally, the point that the General touched upon in his speech is the training. The training of the military and modern warfare, which the joint training of Ukrainian military have revealed that NATO training is inadequate for, but also training of doctors in rehabilitation, and of government on things including on mobilization, from mobilization to wartime communication.
Thank you very much for this, and I would like to open the floor for questions. Please be extremely quick. We will collect 2-3 questions very rapidly. Please, 1 question, not a comment. I'm sorry for this. Just explains your name, affiliation, and we will make a turn with the speakers.
Questions? Very quickly, and it's more of a philosophical question, but what are the chances that if 2028, 2032, there's a Democratic American president, has the damage that Trump's done, is it irreversible, or is there a possibility that Europe will trust the US?
Collect anyone else? Second one, thank you.
Oksana Hus, researcher in University Duisburg-Essen. I'm wondering, you were mainly talking about the economic side of the EU and the military side of it. I'm wondering what is with governance, and especially in connection to what Anastasia was talking about, societal resilience also, that she was mentioning. So I see this kind of 2 extreme pictures in the EU, suddenly moving from economic power to defense production. But so far, in Germany, from the package that Germany dedicated to, there is barely anything to update the governance in face of societal resilience. So I'm wondering what you think about it.
Thank you very much. Maybe a third one, very quick.
Who's first? I don't know.
I don't know. Please.
My name is Waldemar Hroszewski. I'm a BPGA member. I wish my question would be as short as possible, but generally I'd like to address Monsieur le Général Richoul about that. So, primarily about the concept of joint expeditionary forces. As joint expeditionary forces.
Joint expeditionary forces.
Yes. And in my opinion, this concept has been carefully omitted by the major conferences, brainstorming, and think tanks in Europe. So I'd like to know, just in general terms, how plausible the idea is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So maybe we can do a turn, and we can start with Anastasia. You pick the question you want, the questions you want even, and we go.
One is enough. I think the very simple one about the US. I think that really very quick answer. There's not going to be for the elections. Thank you.
That is quick.
About the resilience and the European governance. I think it's a mistake. Actually, it's a mistake. I think I'm also acting. My party is a very old European party, and we are thinking about that. That we have actually a European governance issue. We want to remain not we want to remain something special, as I said, Republic of 27 nations. But we have to think about that. We will not do this time. We will not do the step without our population, even inside the countries. Even if we are not able to solve the issues inside the countries, I think it's a democracy. It's a democracy challenge, and I think it's why we have to solve it.
It's for me. So I try to answer this about the joint expeditionary force. As far as I know, this joint expeditionary force is an idea between France and UK, and it's a matter to reinforce links between France and UK. From a military point of view, just a military point of view, it doesn't. There is no problem to get such a force, because we train in the same academy, we have the same doctrines, we have the same equipment, not the same equipment, but a French helm can be used in a gun in Europe. You have the same calibers of small guns and so on. So we know. I attended myself the general staff in Germany, in Hamburg, and I commanded a regiment of the German-French brigade. That means we are able to fight together. We are able. The only problem we have is the political will. Who takes the lead? Who is the chief? Who says, let's go? Is it possible, for example, for Germany to accept that a German soldier will die under a French command, and the contrary? The problem is mainly political. The military are able to work together because we have NATO, even though tomorrow USA doesn't exist anymore, we will have the same doctrine, we are able to do it. Now, the problem is the political will to do that together. And I had that problem with the German-French brigade, because when we want to engage this brigade in operation, we have always issues between the French and the German understanding. So what are we going to do with it? Under which command? Which are the caveats? That means authorizations of fire, on which purposes? And that's the main issue. The main issue is political, not military.
I wanted to answer the philosophical question, or so-called philosophical question, which is, what happens if a Democrat comes back into office in the U.S.? And the answer is actually very simple, and it's strategic autonomy, meaning that European security cannot depend every 4 years on 80,000 voters in the suburbs of Philadelphia and other small towns in Arizona. So to put it plainly, regardless of who follows Donald Trump, this is a major wake-up call, and we cannot go back to sleep hoping that while we sleep, Americans somehow decide to sort of redirect the ship in another direction, one that would be more favorable to us. And last and very quickly, we also need to be aware on our own continent of, I was talking about the AfD earlier, potential changes in our own democracies could also steer our own ship in different directions. And so we also need to make sure that mechanisms are put in place for sane, healthy stability as well on our own shipping front.
Thank you very much for these answers. Thank you for the questions. I would like to thank you all for listening to this discussion. Sorry that the time was mismanaged, and also we had to shorten the second round, but I think that it was important to leave more space for the first round because we are still into the decision on the short term, and we need to, increase our support and find common solution for Ukraine, for Europe, and for our continent when it comes to security. So once again, thank you, Monsieur le Député, to hosting us, and please join me to thank all the speakers here for this discussion.
First of all, welcome to this second panel, which is dedicated to the discussion of the ways France can enhance its support to Ukraine's European integration, as Ukraine is set to build back better after the hostilities end in the context of reconstruction. This building back better is impossible without capable public sector that is effectively using the future considerable investments that will come into Ukraine, both with the reconstruction and the Euro integration processes. So joining our exchange today on these topics, we have a distinguished panel of speakers. We have Cyril Bélier, who is the head of the Department Europe, Middle East, Asia at Agence Française du Développement. Thank you for being with us today. Gregor Wierendt, head of Sigma program, OECD, which are responsible for the public administration reform, and Bertrand Barry, a former head from the Ukrainian Chamber of Commerce in Ukraine. So thank you very much for being with us here. We'll be bringing also some Ukrainian voices to join our discussion and to give perspectives on the various issues. But before we dive into the questions, allow me to bring your attention to a few facts and figures. So, in addition to the heavy human losses caused by the war and displacement of over 10 million people, the infrastructure damage to Ukraine is considerable, and the latest assessment by the World Bank sets the recovery costs for Ukraine at 500 billion euros over the upcoming next decade. Basically, it's almost 3 times more than Ukraine's GDP in 2024. And the highest reconstruction needs are actually in housing sector, followed by transport and energy. And these are also the sectors that have been affected the most. International partners, of course, have stepped in to support Ukraine's reconstruction effort, even if the hostilities continue to go on. But the reconstruction has a very strong European dimension. Why European dimension? Because Ukraine has an ambition to rebuild into a strong European country, a potential future member of the EU. And in this sense, EU candidate country since June 2020, Ukraine has embarked on the accession negotiations with the EU in June 2024. And with the current Polish presidency, there are big hopes to open 2 clusters of the negotiations with, in terms of accession. And of course, the EU has demonstrated support for Ukraine with a 550 billion euro facility, Ukraine facility, that is supposed to support reconstruction and the reform efforts of Ukraine. Well, European dimension is quite clearly there, and when we look at France, for example, in terms of financial contributions, its total bilateral allocations to Ukraine stood at 5 billion euros in December 2024. It's according to Kiel Institute and Ukraine Support Tracker, and it actually represents only less than 0.2% of the GDP of France. So if we compare Denmark, for example, this figure stands at 2.2, right? So we'll discuss with our panelists whether France should do more and how can it do more. And reconstruction is actually already happening in Ukraine. There are some priority projects that are ongoing, and we know that the regions are building or rebuilding with a double challenge in mind, providing for the basic needs of the population, so it's water, electricity, healthcare, education, and modernizing the way we do things in Ukraine, so that we're more European and we're aligning ourselves with European approach. And recovery is happening also in the regions that are in eastern and southern Ukraine that are disproportionately affected by the war, systematic shelling of civilian and critical infrastructure. For example, the case of Zaporizhia region in the south of Ukraine. Part of it has been occupied by Russian troops, notably the Europe's largest nuclear power plant, which is situated on this side. And the governor of the region, Ivan Fedorov, he shares a bit of the views on what challenges his region faces on reconstruction and how potentially other partners can step in to help. So I suggest we listen to a few of his ideas on this regard.
For you, dear friend, really, support of all civilized world and of the European Union for us very important. Thanks for you, we stay strong and fight with evil. Today, everyday life in the Zaporizhia region full of contrast. First of all, Russian attack more than 500 times every day, attack our territory of Zaporizhia region, which is controlled by government of Ukraine. From 24th of February 2022, our region starts to be evacuation region from temporarily occupied territories. More than 1.5 million citizens just left from temporarily occupied territory across the Zaporizhia region. Now, on territory of Zaporizhia region, just stay near 1 million of citizens, who every day heard more than 7 hours air alarms and few attacks of drones and rockets every day. Now for us, more than ever, important Euro integration for our country and what is very important for our citizens. Before 24th of February 2022, the Zaporizhia region was one of the biggest producer of energy in Ukraine. The Zaporizhia nuclear power station, Dnipro hydroelectric station, is producing more than 30% of all energy all over Ukraine. Now Russians occupied the Zaporizhia nuclear power station and shoot more than 64 rockets for Dnipro hydroelectric station. Of course, now we try to develop decentralized energy producing. Thanks for you, thanks for our partners. We just built new generation units for cogeneration and generators. Of course, it's very important to build it more. Now we already done more than 13 megawatts, but our task more than 100 megawatts, because we need to save all critical infrastructure when Russians attack our energy infrastructure. Next, our challenge is build back better. Of course, now many thousands of our private houses, apartment houses, just damaged or destroyed by Russian rockets and Russian drones. But we like, as quickly as possible, rebuild and help our citizens to come back to their homes and flats. For us, also very important to planning our life after our winning and after liberation of our territories. That's why now we're starting to planning our territories, our future development and our future economic. Of course, one of the biggest challenge is health and surviving for our business. In my opinion, all businessmen, all factories, all plants who now working on frontline regions, they are really heroes, because they pay taxes for our budget and they give workplaces for our million of citizens. Of course, we see challenges. It is not enough citizens who can go to job for our plants. Of course, we see that we need to change our economic from Oriental to Soviet Union, past Soviet Union economic to European economic. Of course, we see challenges that after our victory, we need growing new factories, new plants and new cooperation together with the European Union. That's why, our dear partners, now we're planning long-term relationship and we ready to start build this long-term relationship now and see result after our together later. Thank you. First of all, I want to...
Sorry. Yes. So as you see, a few challenges such as let's say housing, human capacities issues. These are something that our regions in Ukraine are facing with. Another experience is actually of a city this time that is under constant pressure of Russian missiles and drones. It is a Kryvyi Rih. Kryvyi Rih is in the Dnipro region in south of Ukraine, and the city has suffered intense drone attacks actually yesterday, and there were at least 15 explosions. The mayor of Kryvyi Rih, Yuri Vilko, he also highlighted some of the potential of Kryvyi Rih and its openness actually for cooperation in reconstruction projects. So I suggest we watch that as well.
First of all, I want to express
exit.
Oh, thank you. There's some people. Yes, sorry. Apologies for that. That's unfortunately the alias of the. Yes, here we go. Kryvyi Rih.
Шановні учасники конференції, наші французькі партнери і друзі, я Юрій Вілкул, мер міста Кривий Ріг. Радий вітати вас зі сталевого серця України і промислового центру. 3 роки повномасштабної війни, щоденні виклики, випробування ракетними атаками, проблемами з водопостачанням, блекаутами. Та попри все, наше місто тримає оборону, живе і розвивається. Кривому Рогу в цьому році 250. Пройдено шлях від маленького козацького поселення до величної індустріальної перлини країни. Аби не війна, ми будували нові парки, заклади освіти, медицини, арт-простори. Натомість ми споруджуємо підземні школи, мобільні вуличні укриття, нові сховища. Однак, попри війну, ми маємо завдання утримувати економіку, розвивати бізнес, впроваджувати нові технології, відбудовувати наше місто. Ми знайшли справжніх друзів за межами країни і тісно співпрацюємо з міжнародними та європейськими партнерами. Команда Кривого Рогу багатьма успішно реалізованими проєктами заслужила довіру і довела свою надійність. Ми відкриті, готові до плідної співпраці з вами, нашими французькими партнерами.
So we have a representative of Kryvyi Rih with us today, of the city of Kryvyi Rih. This is Olha Mala. So if you have questions or if you would like to exchange on potential cooperation, she's here to answer your questions and to engage in the discussions. So it's what comes out of those videos is actually, among other things, is the resilience of Ukrainian people and of local governments in the context of the war and continued Russian shelling. The scale of destruction, as you have heard from what has been said from the representatives of Zaporizhzhia and Kryvyi Rih, but also from the World Bank assessment, is huge, right? So we're talking about 500 billion euros in potential investment, and it requires significant private sector investments in addition to the public sector guarantees and funds. And this is where the government of Ukraine, through its investment promotion agency, Ukraine Invest, is working to attract private sector funding. We have the representative of Ukraine Invest with us today, so I would invite Konstantin Lesnichi to come and share with us a few guiding key ideas what government is doing to attract private sector investment.
Thank you for the invitation. I cannot say for the whole government, but at least I can mention what the Ukraine Invest doing. And actually, to be honest, it's hard to speak after the first panel when just the Europe and this and US issues and Ukraine in the middle as we were discussed. But I will try to be positive, but I will start with certain figures for you to sort of to realize what's going on in the economy overall. So basically, Ukrainian GDP grew last year 3.4%, which was lower than last year. Last year we had 5.3%, but in year 2002 we had a drop of 29%. So just for you to figure out what we got through. And in terms of real figures, Ukrainian GDP is $189 billion. If we compare with France, last year in France it was 3.1 trillion. So Ukrainian economy is much smaller, definitely, than France, just for your reference. And keeping that in mind, I would say that, let's say, that Europe and overall world community and IFIs helped significantly to Ukraine last year, providing a coverage of a budget deficit for $42 billion US, which is a lot. In terms of inflation, last year we had 12%, before that it was 5%. By estimates of the government, next year we're going to have around 8.4%. In terms of reserves, National Bank had the record reserves last year of $44 billion, and expectations for the next year is a bit lower, around 38. National banking keep interest rate at around 13% just to deal with inflation. In terms of FDIs, foreign direct investments, in year 2022, when the war started, we had only $400 million of FDIs end of the year. In 2004, we have 3.1 billion, and it's mainly energy, agri-sector, IT, and infrastructure. The estimations for the next year of the Ministry of Economy is between 3.5 and 5 billion, which is also not that significant in terms of growth, but it will depend on the security situation, EU free trade regime, reconstruction of infrastructure and investor incentives, war insurance, and other issues. Now, what are the sectors that foreign investors looking at when thinking about Ukraine and doing investments? First of all, definitely energy sector. Probably you had that in certain regions we have a significant deficit of energy, so it can be up to 30% in industrialized regions. And we are happy that our European partners helping us with that. We have EU Energy Secretariat that they created fund that is right now is 1.1 billion euros dedicated to energy sector to Ukraine. We're very, very grateful for that. In other sectors, definitely critical raw materials, that is everybody talking about, including our American friends. So I guess they knew about that. So, and we'll see how it's going to develop. Manufacturing industry, IT, construction, transport, and logistics. I would say, sir, in any situation, there are certain companies that are risk takers, and definitely we see the inflow of money from that companies, but definitely private capital goes behind public capital. And we do not have, at that particular point, the significant, I would say, inflows of public capital into Ukraine. And today, there's certain figures were mentioned that revealed Ukraine, estimated by the World Bank at 524 billion dollars. And it can be more, but I mean it's significant, really significant amount of money. And just we think that the private sector will follow the inflows, but we have to wait till the war is over. But that is one of the major, I would say, stimulus for the investors to start looking at the opportunities of Ukraine right now. As for other incentives, I would look also at strategic positioning of Ukraine. So we are geopolitically located quite well, and we have a good EU membership perspectives. As some of my colleagues mentioned, that we opened already. We had 36 different groups working with the EU on that, and I guess we can have progress in that. Ukraine right now also benefiting from the free access to EU market. So we think it will be continued, and we will and Ukrainian exporters will benefit from that. Actually, majority of many companies also from France and Europe they are exporters, and they feel much better in Ukraine, to be honest, than in France. As for markets, the early mover advantage definitely is low penetration, and you can get significant market share, high potential returns. If you look at the I would say the level of costs, how you can get into the market, and let's say you can get access to land or can buy partners. Let's say assets or M&A activity. So Ukraine would be much cheaper, and it's by obvious reason than everywhere else. Natural resources, I mentioned, skilled workforce. Just every year we have 130,000 engineers graduated from Ukrainian universities. Something to keep in mind. Last thing to mention about government incentives. So basically we have a lot of instruments that would help foreign investors to step in, including the VAT and import duty exemptions, corporate income tax exemptions, tax breaks, reduced regulation, other stuff. So welcome to Ukraine. Please don't wait till the war is over. Just start looking at the opportunities. Form teams, come to Ukraine, meet with the government officials, meet on the regional level, do feasibility studies. So let's build better. Maybe not back, but better. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sitting. Thank you. Well, the scene for us to start our conversation actually with the members of the panel around exactly that. How, for example, for you, who have actually been working in Ukraine and present in Ukraine in your different organizations, this experience has been. So my first question is actually, what would be the word that best describes your experience working with Ukraine so far? So we know potentially, particularly in this context of the war. So if I turn to the questions par exemple, to Cyril Bélier, who has been, of course, has been working, Group AfD itself has been working in Ukraine for quite a long time. So we know that, for example, you have the Expertise France that is present since 2006, and you also have another mechanism, Propaco, which is there from 2019, and you have actually recently opened an office in Ukraine, in Kiev. So how has it been cooperating? Certainly for, let's say, a year now that you have the presence and mandate in Ukraine.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting us to this conference. Very useful conference. It's always useful to be able to talk about what we do, because we are playing with very, very, very large, immense numbers and volumes of what's needed. We don't explain whether it's public finance, private finance, whether there's going to be grants, whether there's going to be loan, whether there's going to be guarantees. Is it going to go and to be implemented over a 2-year period, a 3-year period, a 20-year period? So there is a lot of numbers and words that creates a kind of brouillard, a kind of smog around this. So let me try a fog around this. So let me try to be a bit concrete. The French Development Agency is only one part of the international public finance that is available from France. We are on a very specific part of the public finance, and also we work hand in hand with the EU and with the other financial institutions. There are 3 companies in the group. Expertise France, whom you mentioned, been working in Ukraine for 20 years, mainly in capacity building, a lot in justice, anti-corruption, and this type of activity. We have a subsidiary that is working with the private sector, and you mentioned the importance of the private sector in renewable energy. I think, unfortunately, the investment that we had in the country previously was destroyed by the war, but we'll refinance it and rebuild it, and we'll also finance projects and invest in private equity. For example, a fund that is called Horizon Capital, that is working especially on IT and digital economy in Moldova and in Ukraine. And lastly, we've been given the mandate by the states 1 year ago to intervene as AfD as such, which means public finance, public development finance, either through the government or to the public banks or to the society, to the local government. I must say that among the 50 billion that was announced by the EU, 50% is coming from the French budget, and we're also a shareholder of the EBRD and the EIB, and so all this has to be viewed as a whole. What's been very striking when I was a few months ago in Kiev is the, and I think this is very important for private investors in particular, is the vision that of the decision makers, the public decision makers, the think tanks, the people at the oblast or the country level. What I mean by vision is this striking ability to be able to talk and solve the urgent needs in terms of access to energy, water, sanitation, transport, logistics, etc. But in the same time being able to think of the plans ahead and the way to rebuild or to transform the country and the economy in the long run. And one of the most striking fueling of this energy is the perspective of the EU adhesion, the incorporation into the European Union. You have people, you have a minister that's talking to you about the 2 or 3 transformers that were destroyed in Kryvyi last night, but at the same time talking about interconnection and the grid that is going to be necessary to be connected to the EU. So this is very, very striking and quite unique, I must say.
Thank you. So vision and ability to respond to urgent needs while also thinking ahead and thinking about the future steps. Okay, so then the same question I turn now to you, Mr. Barnier. We know that, for example, France is very present, right, in Ukraine. It's one of the first employer in Ukraine. It also has around 180 enterprises present and working in Ukraine with 4.4 billion euro of investments by French enterprises in Ukraine since their arrival there. So we see that France is quite present, and of course the organization, the Franco-Ukrainian Chamber of Commerce, has been present in this. What was your experience? How would you describe working in Ukraine?
So thank you. Yes, I'm representing here the French Chamber of Commerce. We indeed represent 95% of the French business present in Ukraine. We're the largest foreign employer. We're the fifth investor in the country. How has it been? I mean, for me, also my business is a bit different than the Chamber of Commerce. I run a law firm, the only French law firm present in Ukraine. I've been in Ukraine for 15 years. We work a lot with the administration. We work a lot. Unfortunately, when you run a law firm, you see a lot of difficulties also to do business in Ukraine. What I would say about the changes and what has occurred over the last 3 years are two things. It's one word that has been used a lot is the resilience, because it's when you have a war starting that has been unexpected. Myself, I was in Kiev when the war started with my family, so I can tell you how it is. So the resilience of the people, and also this faculty to adapt, this faculty to believe in the future. And one role that is very important and that we underline at the French Chamber of Commerce, which is very important, is the role of women during the war. We organize a business award for women, dedicated to women, Ukrainian women. We have this year, it's one of the most largest events in Ukraine that we organize. And we have 500 candidates with absolutely great projects, great creativity. So, and really, the men are doing a great job and are, of course, mobilized, and we easily can imagine what's happening. And women have been stepping up a lot. They take roles in very high places. And within companies, it's always been a great pleasure and really to rely on the possibility and to work with women. So that's what we tend to put as a major, it's also one of the major part of the program of France, and that's what we also try to implement in Ukraine, is really to increase the role of women in business.
Thank you so much. So here I summarize the resilience of the people, faculty to adapt, and also role of women in society. Thank you. And I'm now turning to Gregor Behrendt. We might ask ourselves, why do we have to talk about public administration or public administration reform? Well, we're talking about reconstruction, and actually what is happening is that we need to make sure that the local governments or people are able to absorb the investments that are going to come, but also that they are doing this effectively, and that has the highest value for the society. It's also one of the pillars of the accession negotiations with the EU. It's in the cluster 1, so it's very important. And hence, I'm turning to Gregor Behrendt, who is the head of Sigma program. And you have been yourself actually involved in the development of the first strategy for the reform of the public administration of Ukraine in 2016. So you know the country for a while, and this was developed based on the OECD EU principles of public governments. So how has it been working with Ukraine, especially since the full-scale invasion?
Well, for me, the word that would best describe the spirit of Ukrainians during these last few years is perseverance, or resilience, or tenacity, or persistence, however you want to call it. And it is reflected at so many levels. You know, if you just remember back in February 22, many people were saying Kiev will fall in 3 days, Ukraine will capitulate, Zelensky is on the way to leave the country, and so on. And now we are 3 years into the war, and Ukraine has stood and has kept, preserved its independence and its sovereignty. And yes, of course, it has been tragic. 20% of the territory is occupied. But if there hadn't been such fierce resistance, there would be no Ukraine anymore, at least not sovereign and independent Ukraine. This is also reflected in the area that we cover. The OECD works a lot with Ukraine, and the program I'm heading at the OECD is a joint EU-OECD program. It's a mixed animal. We work a lot with the European Commission supporting Ukraine in its accession way. The public governance system, the machinery of the government has continued to function all the time. So it has ensured continuity of decision making, of political decision making, of policy making, of service delivery. And not only that, I mean, there are areas where Ukraine has actually advanced significantly in recent years. Just want to mention one area, digitalization, digital government. Back in 2018, Ukraine was around rank 80 in the UN e-government benchmark, or e-government survey. Today, Ukraine is number 30. With the establishment of the Ministry of Digital Transformation, things have changed radically. And Ukrainians really went about it in a very smart way, putting in place all the enablers, the registries, the interoperability frameworks, Trebita, the portal, DIA, and so on. And it all works really almost perfectly. Rank 30, this means the country is among the global frontrunners in this area. And just as an anecdote, it's the only country in the world where you can marry online. Even Estonians do not allow people to marry online. In Ukraine you can do it. Of course it was done for obvious reasons to enable young boys and girls on the front to marry without physical presence. And the last thing, on the day, at the level of daily operational work, what I think also Cyril mentioned, it sometimes looks surreal. It sometimes looks like two parallel realities. On the one hand, you know that there are people dying on the front. There are daily drone strikes, missile strikes. There are people dying. People obliged to take shelter practically every day. If you travel to Kiev, you can experience it yourself. And on the other hand, it's almost business as usual, because it's not only the war. In parallel, you have the process of EU accession, which is in itself a very heavy process, a very difficult process. Don't forget that Ukraine is also a prospective OECD member and is engaging in this initial accession dialogue with the OECD. And all the policy reforms are ongoing. So, you have bombs and missiles on one hand, and on the other hand, we are discussing, boring issues of civil service recruitment and I don't know, what have you, center of government improvements, and so on and so forth. And this really works very well, and this is what I think strikes me the most. And I think we can all learn a lot from Ukraine. We are often asked to provide advice. Our Ukrainian colleagues ask, how should we organize this or that in wartime? And we answer very honestly, we don't know. We don't have the experience. You are the masters of this, and we will learn from you. And when Ukraine one day sits at the table becomes member of the EU and the OECD, Ukraine will have a lot to bring in terms of experience and practice.
Thank you so much, Birger. Actually, I would like us to think about it more in details about why is it important to have a capable public administration in places in Ukraine, and why does it matter for reconstruction? Why does it matter for your integration, right? So you, of course, you're the best position to tell us, maybe very briefly, like a few ideas. Why does it matter? Because we are talking about businesses coming to Ukraine, we're talking about Ukraine moving towards a new ways of functioning, which is more EU-like. So what is it about?
I mean, there's no doubt that at the moment what matters the most is the defense and the military. So the first panel compared to this panel was much more relevant. We all understand that. But you know, in normal times, in peace times, but to some extent also in war times, what distinguishes successful countries from less successful countries is public governance, nothing else. It's not the natural resources or something similar, it's public governance. And the same applies to Ukraine. Good public governance is important for many projects in Ukraine right now. It's super important for recovery and reconstruction. So many projects will be going on. They will have to be very well coordinated. There will have to be very good leadership and coordination from the center of government. The public financial management and especially public investment management will have to be sound with a single project pipeline as a tool that we recommend. The public procurement system and not only the Ukrainian citizens, also the international partners who are contributing the resources, the funds, are expecting that the recovery process be one with integrity, with credibility, value for money, public procurement, and so on. This is extremely important. And in this context, fight against corruption. Ukraine has done a lot in recent years in fight against corruption. And just think that in 23, the president of the Supreme Court of Ukraine was arrested for corruption, was tried for corruption, was convicted of corruption, and is still being tried for other acts of corruption. And there have been other high-level corruption cases. And when in a country high-level corruption cases are being processed, this is a very, very good sign. Now, having said this, and also the institutions that are responsible for fight against corruption, from the investigation, NABU, prosecution, SAPO, and of course the court, High Anti-Corruption Court, they have been not only established, but they have started to function in a relatively independent way, in a relatively credible way. This is all good. However, it is not good enough. If you look at the Transparency International surveys, you will see that Ukraine still lags behind, and there's a lot to do still on this front of corruption. And of course, the European integration. For the European integration, public administration reform is one of the, as the EU says, one of the fundamentals, for very good reasons. If you don't have a good government machinery, how could you be able to harmonize your national legislation with EU acquis? And how would you be able to implement the European acquis? Because the EU does not have executive bodies to implement the EU law, it's the member states through their judiciaries and through their administrations who do that. And in this respect, Ukraine has also recognized this reform as a priority, has established a good strategic framework for public administration reform. There's a minister who is responsible for that. There's a coordination structure. There's a strategy in place. There are, the responsibilities are distributed, and all that. And a lot of things have been done, especially on service delivery, but also in other areas. But there's one big area which is weak and needs reinforcement and is crucial, and that's the civil service and the human resources management. Not only because of the toll that is paid to the war, which is that so many people are on the front, so many civil servants are in the army, so many civil servants, well, many also died. Many are stuck in the occupied territories. Thousands, especially women, left the country for obvious reasons. Not only that, and not only that, we have a martial law which suspended open competitions for jobs, also for obvious reasons. Not only that, there were reasons, underlying reasons for problems even before the war. There's huge turnover, and this existed also already before the war. There is huge dependence on external advice provided by international partners, EU, used to be also USA, and others. They provide a great service, and the EU coordinates it, and this is very important for the Ukrainians, but the ministries depend too much on this support. It is just not sustainable. So long story short, a lot to be done. EU integration is a heavy process, it's a merit-based process. The EU, as the French would say, ça se mérite. It's not...
You cannot speak that. Yes, thank you so much. So I think that kind of sets us into a thinking around this. How does business make sure that they can go into the country and invest, and having predictability, transparency of these mechanisms, and also knowing that they can, rest assured that their interests will be protected through the judicial system that is working and that is effective. So I think it would be good at this point to maybe go back to a little bit of the perspectives of the local government. Again, looking at some of the challenges that they are facing. Again, we're talking now about eastern part of Ukraine and Kharkiv region, which is, has been occupied by Russian troops in 2022 and then liberated. But then the city has been under constant since then, and for example, last night there was a huge attack on civilian infrastructure with 11 people injured. We have also the governor of the region who shares some of his concerns around some of the things that you have mentioned, both Cyril and Bertrand, concerning the healthcare, education, and other services that the businesses present in, for example, French businesses present in Ukraine are supporting or trying to support. So just
Dear participants of the conference, dear colleagues, dear friends. First of all, I would like to thank you for the support of the people of our country. We greatly appreciate all the assistance provided. As you know, Kharkiv region has been an outpost of Ukraine for 3 years. The current situation is really difficult at the moment. Our region suffers daily from attacks by Russian occupiers. Since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, Russia has launched more than 21,000 attacks with all possible weapons, such as missiles, guided bombs, Iskanders, and drones. 3 years ago, thousands of families with children woke up at 4:30 in the morning to Russian missile strikes. This seemed impossible in the 21st century when there are international institutions who are supposed to protect human rights and democracy. But today in Izium there is a fresh mass grave of 451 tortured bodies, 250 of which were women and 5 were children. In the 21st century, in the center of Europe, we have opened a monument for the memory of the killed children. Russia took 98 little lives in our region alone. 459 children were injured. Since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, the Russian army has carried out over 1,000 strikes on Ukrainian energy infrastructure facility. Those at dawn and December 25, 2024, the aggressor country massively attacked energy facilities in Kharkiv. On Christmas Day, the occupiers launched 12 ballistic missiles at boiler houses, thermal power plants, and the city's electricity facilities. As a result of the strikes on the heat and power facilities, a significant part of Kharkiv was left without heating. About 500,000 people lost access to heat in their homes as a result of the attacks. This is over 2,600 restored buildings. The Russian army planned to capture the Kharkiv region in a few days. But we proved once and for all that the Kharkiv region is Ukraine. Even when 30% of our region was occupied, we continue fighting. And the army forces of Ukraine bought our native Ukraine lands back matter by matter. Because we were born here, and here we see our future. This war is a terrible tragedy for our people, an act of the terrorism against millions of people. But at the same time, it has posed important challenges to us, not only for our state, but also for the whole world. I will start with internal challenges. First of all, we must continue to strengthen our defense capabilities, but at the same time build a future for our children. It is important to take shelter in educational institutions because the Kharkiv region has always been the educational and scientific center of Ukraine. Thus, we cannot lose our professional staff and our potential. Healthcare is also an important direction for us. We are building the first underground hospital in Europe so that our doctors can provide quality medical care even during shelling. This is a unique project, the implementation of which also requires your support. For example, the regional hospital received 4,300 baby deliveries during the war. These are new lives that are worth fighting for. In total, more than 6,000 civilians in the region were injured. But our healthcare system withstood these challenges. The biggest request from our people is housing restoration. Almost 37,000 residential buildings were destroyed. Thousands of people were left without a roof over their heads. More than 75,000 infrastructure objects that were built over years have been destroyed. We have plans to restore everything, and we will be grateful for your support. Another challenge is demining. Our fertile black soil is now our Europe, and now 30% of our territory is contaminated with Russian mines. In order to restore our agricultural potential, we must attract attention and use the maximum resources of the entire civilized world. We are fighting not only for our freedom, but also for peace and security in Europe. We are grateful to all our international partners, in particular France, for the support you provide in the difficult time, for your personal presence in the frontline Kharkiv region. Thanks to your support. Together we can resist Russian aggression and defend our land, our values, our destiny. Slava Ukraini. Dear.
Yes, so again, a call for support and cooperation across several sectors that have been mentioned: energy, housing, healthcare, and education. As you know, shelters are becoming a norm, underground schools, underground hospitals, this is becoming a norm. And again, is a manifestation of the resilience of Ukrainian people and trying to adapt to the situation while still thinking about the future. And just the last perspective that I think is very pertinent, because we already see in some other regions like Kyiv region, Fastiv, the city of Fastiv, cooperation with France, with French companies, in meeting the needs of the population and thinking about the future and about reconstruction at this stage. So listen to the mayor of Fastiv of his ideas around cooperation.
Sirs and madams, I am Mikhail Nikizhuk, mayor of Fastiv. On behalf of all the inhabitants of the Fastiv city territorial community, sincerely thank the French people and each of the participants of the conference. 3 years of full-scale war with Russia how can France strengthen its support for Ukraine in the field of security and European integration, for supporting Ukraine in our struggle for European democratic values. The war has destroyed all our lives, but it has also made us stronger. It made our desire to live in a European Union more powerful. We are very grateful to the French people and the French Republic for their steadfast support of us through the provision of weapons, military assistance, and leadership in rebuilding our country and ensuring normal living conditions for our residents. One example of this support is the initiative of French President Emmanuel Macron to create a project finance program Fund Ukraine and the implementation of specific projects. Among them is a project that will be implemented directly in Fastiv. Fastiv is a municipality located not far from the capital of Ukraine, Kyiv. We have a population of 65,000 people. In 2022, we were practically on the front line and received more than 10,000 of ADPs. The Refastiv project is aimed at helping internally displaced people affected by the war, who lost their homes in the occupied or near frontline territories, to live normally in Fastiv. For this purpose, a new neighborhood is currently being designed, which will be built in Fastiv in a fairly short time. This project was made possible primarily thanks to French companies, STU Architects, Novacom, Atelier de France, with the support of BG2V and IRDT Wood, as well as the personal support of Mr. Pierre Elbron, the French special envoy for Ukraine relief and reconstruction. There is a lot of work to be done, but our unity fills us with confidence that we will survive this war together, that peace will certainly prevail over our land, and that Ukraine as a European step will rebuild all destroyed. Thank you for your support, thank you for your assistance. Slava Ukraini, Slava France. Yeah,
So yes, so a bit of the context here, and so now we come straight to, of course, the questions around the ways France could strengthen cooperation with Ukraine going forward when we talk about business sector engagement, and in particular, if there are certain ways that France can do that, what are the challenges, how they could be overcome? So I think I will first ask you. About exactly what other venues to strengthen cooperation between AfD and Ukrainian counterparts, and if you see any challenges.
Okay, just to follow up on what you just said, having a sound, clear, transparent business environment and public policies is essential for any private sector investment. So that's the bottom line, and we will work with the different ministries and at the sub-regional level as well, just to make sure, and through Expertise France or AfD, to bring this support and enable that the dependency on external technical assistance support reduces, and that there is an overall autonomy at all levels to create this what we call the authorizing environment for businesses to be there. So what France has done so far. So when during the first year of the war, we extended the €500 million direct budget support that was implemented by AfD on behalf of the government. Then the Expertise France changed the the application points of their financing, to support the judiciary system, to prepare and document for the war crimes that are going to be pursued in the next years. Proparco, our subsidiary specialized in the private sector, has started to work with the EBRD on trade finance credit line to enable businesses and French businesses to continue their activity there. So that's what's been done. And then to respond to the short-term needs in terms of equipment especially, the Ministry of Finance has extended the 200 million euro grant. And this is what Pierre talked about with the different 17, I think, French businesses that this project in partnership with with different stakeholders in Ukraine to provide this equipment, including rail, including radiology, portable systems, etc. So that's what's been done to respond at our level to the urgent needs. Now, what we are going to do moving forward, first of all, in collaboration with other financial institutions that are already there and have been there for a long time, I'm talking especially EBRD, World Bank, and KfW, which are still there, and they have been reallocated the funds that were already in place. The way we function and will be functioning when we extend a loan, because it's through loans generally speaking, we extend a loan to beneficiary, and they call for tenders to implement the infrastructure loan. So that's the way we're going to do it, and we are going to do it in two ways, because that's where our value added is. First of all, work with cities, with local governments, and extending the loans directly to them, because we are one of the only in the world doing this, along with the EBRD, mainly, a bit more the others, but not really. And for that you need to work with cities that are able to have accounting systems and enough transparency, the ability to reimburse the loan at some point, etc., etc. So we can do this directly, and that's what we're going to do. And we can also do it through the banking system. The Ukrainian banking system has been very resilient, especially for the public banks that are working, like Ukreximbank, for example. And we can work through them to extend smaller size loans to more fragile communities that are more in the east, more affected by the conflict. In which sectors? We talked about them since the beginning: health and rehabilitation centers, transports. We're working currently with the LIFT. It's very much in the west, so there is no real challenges in terms of war. Access to water, and we're working in the Kryvyi region, in Kharkiv region on this. And on health as well in Odessa. And we're going to work, as I said, water, sanitation, energy, transportation. And when the time comes, and when we are able to talk and to work with large SOEs on rail, for example, then we're going to extend loans to them and to work rebuilding the country. So as you understood, the French Development Agency is a long-term partner in all of the countries we've been in, sometimes more than 50 years. So we are here to stay, and we're here in the long run.
Thank you. It seems like a long-term partner and a privileged one for the local governments, actually, for the cities, for this dimension of the governance, which is super important, because the reconstruction, most of it is going to happen at the places locally, right? So it's not just national level. So turning now to you, Bertrand, around exactly the same question about what could be the potential moving forward in enhancing this cooperation between French businesses and Ukraine. How do you see that going forward?
Well, first we are already quite present in the country, but what can go forward? In very few words, Ukraine and France have a lot of similarities. The agro sector, the technology sector. Currently, we talked before about the defense sector, which is the sector where France is leading. There are plenty of similarities. In terms of what the projects and the funds and the reconstruction is going, France is in infrastructure one of the leaders in the world, with many very large players and a lot of medium and small-sized enterprises, also specialized. I had a meeting yesterday with the Ministry of Infrastructure, with the delegation in Kiev, with the delegation of French companies, where we had 15 French companies that are either already that are present in Ukraine, that are already building and doing large infrastructure, not under the 200 million program or the program. The work has started way before, and so we are trying to enhance this, because reconstruction will go, and we all understand, I think, that the public funds are something, of course, that are needed to launch the machine, to bring people to be aware, have the will to concentrate, but basically the French business will need, a private business, will need on its own to go, to step up and go to get as many projects and participate as much as we can in the reconstruction, and that's what we're doing today. As to finish, as saying Mr. President Macron about now 3 years or 2 years ago, reconstruction is now, because there's a lot of infrastructures that are destroyed, that needs to be, we talked about electricity, we talked about a lot of other infrastructures, and they need to be rebuilt. And that's what, indeed, French companies are trying to play a large role in, and that's what we're trying to, our role at the Chamber of Commerce is very simple, it's to give as many information to people as possible that are interested in Ukraine. We do that through seminars, webinars, podcasts and information. Everything is available on our site so that everybody has access to the information.
Thank you. A connected question to that. So what would be the main issue? What would be challenges in enhancing this cooperation? What do you see as main obstacles?
The main obstacle is always the same. It's for French private business, it's the financing. Somebody has to finance when we're talking about infrastructure. There is no, so it's either governments, it's either banks, depending on the countries where we are present and operating. So that's the main challenge. That's why also things may be taking more time currently than they should. But that's a core question, of course.
Okay, and maybe a question to Cyril around the cooperation with local governments. What do you see as the main challenge going forward, let's say, on this project, under extended loans to cities and local governments?
First, capabilities, internal capabilities, the ability for these municipalities, which have shown great resilience to be able to prepare for the future and to have the ability to manage the projects. It's not only a question of deciding to finance, but you have to manage and to implement the project, and it takes a few months or a few years. That's one of the challenges. The other is access to finance. Of course, and that's what you just said, access to finance is key. You have to bear in mind that among the tools that have been built and proposed by the EU, the famous 50 billion euro funds, there is a large chunk of guarantees that is included, so guaranteeing the projects, and we, for example, are going to present a large 200 or 300 million worth of credit line of projects to be guaranteed, so that we can go to the country and propose this financing and with some kind of de-risking scheme. So that's one of the other areas. So I would say capacity and ability of the system. But my feeling is that given the fact that the financial system is pretty strong, that the central bank has been able to have a sound monetary policy given the circumstances. I think the ground is there, the roots are there, and the ability to rebuild on this financial sector is going to be important, and that's key for the country, because external finance is okay, but it's really not enough if you want to develop and to redevelop a private sector that is sustainable in the long run.
Very strong point about de-risking and again capabilities. We come back to the capabilities, human capabilities of actually delivering on any of that, right, of reconstruction. And so my question, of course, to you, Gregor, about how do you see going forward the cooperation between OECD, let's say, and Ukraine on public administration reform? What do you see as a priority?
As I said before, public administration reform is fundamental for European integration, and there are a lot of challenges. If I have to point out one challenge, I would say how to bring people back. And this does not relate only to public administration, but to all systems in the country. How to attract talent, how to retain talent. This is probably the biggest problem of Ukraine going forward. Because so many people left the country, settled down abroad, and the smartest, the brightest, at least the smartest and the brightest, you have to bring them back, not only to public administration but also to other systems. Now, how can we all help in all these processes? Of course, this cannot compare at the moment with the importance of military assistance or with the importance of financial assistance, but assistance in terms of policy analysis, policy advice, peer exchange of experience is also important. Ukrainian colleagues need that and appreciate that a lot. If you look, for example, at the structure of the Ukrainian facility that Cyril has just mentioned, you will see that it has 3 pillars. Of course, the most important is the financial support, just to support the ability to put together a viable budget and to continue deliver basic services. Then, of course, it's the investment pillar, and there is the third smallest pillar, which is about technical assistance, supporting the reforms. Supporting reforms is not expensive, but it is super important. We, as the OECD, will continue to do that in all areas, because the OECD, as you know, covers all policy areas. Perhaps the area of public administration reform is one of the ones with the most intensive cooperation, in cooperation with the European Union, with the European Commission as well. And if the question relates to France and what can France do, I would say France already is doing a lot in this respect. Just recently, last year, a letter of intent or a memorandum of understanding was signed between the French Minister of de la fonction de transformation publique and the Ukrainian Minister of the Cabinet of Ministers, the Center of Government Minister, the one responsible for public administration, defining the ways of cooperation. If I give you an example, just in December last year, there was a big group of Ukrainian state secretaries, who are the top civil servants in the ministries, visiting the OECD and the DGAFP, the main French institution for public administration reforms. And this was an extremely interesting visit, with extremely interesting exchanges, and very much appreciated by the Ukrainian colleagues. They want to, just like I'm myself coming from a country that joined the EU in 2004. I was leading some reforms at that time in our government, and I know how much it means if you can talk to peers and learn from their good practices, but also from their mistakes. And as you said, there are similarities between. France is a good example for Ukraine. If nothing else, for the size of the country. You know, Ukraine learn from Estonia? Yes, to some extent, in some aspects, yes. On digital government, probably yes. But in terms of how to structure and to organize the governance system, France can be a much better example, given the size.
Perfect. So France has already started working on that with Ukraine, supporting, but there is much more to be done. And Céline, you wanted to react.
Yes, I wanted to add something. Thank you for that. Ukraine is a very decentralized country. There was a decentralized law, and it's actually operationally it does work. One of the characteristics of France is that it's a very decentralized country as well. The EU has a program that is called Twinning Programs, enabling public administration from EU countries, for example Estonia for digital and France for justice, etc. And so we have the twinnings at the ministerial level, but also we support a lot of projects that are initiated by local government in France in their activity and the cooperation with other countries. And for example, we are supporting Région Île-de-France that is working with the Kyiv region on certain aspects, especially trying to get finance from the EU, because we've been receiving a lot of finance from the EU in the past. So this is another way where there is a lot of synergies to find, and there has been many delegations from mayors, from Ukrainian mayors coming to Europe and coming to France to create this kind of cooperation and peer learning that is going to be instrumental in rebuilding all the local government system.
Thank you so much. So yeah, we can, I think, close this discussion on a very positive note of peer learning and importance of these exchanges and fostering exchanges between Ukraine and France and other countries, because we're talking specifically about France today. I would like to open now the floor to questions. We still have a few minutes to ask questions, and so for this you need to raise your hand and we'll pass you the mic. So please feel free. There is a question in the back. And I would like to thank you, all of you, for such a very interesting discussion and insights.
Hello, my name is Lionel Duroy. I'm representing a French NGO, and I have a question, because, just a second, if I have a question, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
So yes, in France, we faced a lot of administrative issues. These obstacles involve various entities, including Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Economy, and sometimes regional or city administration. Don't you think it would be relevant to establish a unified administration platform dedicated to Ukraine? This will simplify administrative procedures and adapt rules to the wartime context.
Thank you. So I don't know, we'd like to try to answer the question, a platform that would mobilize, that will be one-stop shop basically for any action or interaction with France-Ukraine.
Okay, I'll jump in. I'm not sure I completely understand. Do you talking about a platform in France or a platform in Ukraine?
I mean, in France and in Europe, both.
Okay, there are many platforms, too many platforms. But yes, yeah, I completely understand that. And unfortunately, yeah, some of the support to the NGOs in France is channeled through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, especially everything that deals with reconstruction and humanitarian. And so a part of the public financing for NGOs goes through AFD. So that's the thing, and we have to explain that. The good news is that we talk a lot together and we co-finance projects. So sometimes they come to us, CDCS, which is the body at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, is talking to us, and we actually co-finance a project in Ukraine with, I think, Électriciens Sans Frontières or Fondation Veolia, I can't remember. And yeah, the only answer I can provide, because I'm just the operator mobilizing these resources, is that is explaining what exactly we are doing. Unfortunately, I don't think it does exist a European platform for NGOs. Every country has their own, population of NGOs that they want to support, so that's an issue. The EU also has their ways to support the NGOs. So my answer is there is no platform that I know. We try to do our best at the French level so that we can put you in the right direction, and we are very happy to meet you to discuss about that. And indeed, I believe that at the European level there would need to be some form of coordination between all the different countries.
Thank you. I have Greg also who wants to add to that.
Yes, just wanted to add that in the OECD and in the EU there is a very strong coordination on Ukraine in general. In the OECD there is a unit for Ukraine in the Global Relations Directorate, and in the EU, of course, there's a special directorate within the DG NST, which is the DG Enlargement, which is dedicated to working with Ukraine. So I think in both organizations there is a good platform for coordination, which I would say includes also NGOs, cooperation with NGOs.
Thank you. Any more questions? Yes, I have a question here from Olena.
Thank you very much for a great discussion. Olena Chipurna, head of the Professional Government Association. So we work, speaking about public services, we're trying, so since 2014 we placed 150 Western educated people into public service, some stayed, some didn't, but that's the goal, to empower. We do events, we do research, we organize study visits for international business to Ukraine and for our partners. And we started to work with Hromadas this year for our decentralized communities. And really want to back up your words, Cyril, that they really lack the capacity. Like, we need to please teach us in practice how to do project management, because we need to apply for those funds and actually implement them, but how do we do it? How do we build partnerships? And me and Ludmila were engaged in this pro bono, basically training for them, and we'll think about scaling up. And in terms of public sector, Gregor, when I'm speaking to NGOs who work in there, yeah, we discuss a lot, maybe that will be a question to you, the essence of directorates. Because what I feel is missing in Ukraine, and what European partners and American partners and developed countries have, that's a very strong analytics. So someone would provide those analytics for the government, and the ideal is understood per this reform. It was supposed to be directorates, but somehow we feel it's a failed process. Not everyone is doing this. So are there, any ways you see out for that? And also now, for example, the way to strengthen public service is to go away in donor support, to go away from reform support teams, RSTs. Yes. Because we see with USAID, the whole sector of experts just leaving the sector. But instead, to support NGOs who are very expert. For example, we didn't show the video of Yaroslav military, but he can be a mini minister of defense by itself. So by investing in NGO experts, that long-term. And final question to Bertrand. When you talk about businesses French businesses invest in Ukraine, do they want to go to Ukraine before making a decision, or they're fine with the portfolio of projects or whatever portfolio of numbers you present to them? So, thank you.
Well, the members of the chamber are all present in Ukraine because they're all active. GG made the largest investment ever in Ukraine. So they bought last year for 1.5 billion euro LifeCell and Data Group. So the two operators in the telecommunication. cable companies. And that's thanks, of course, to certain guarantees on investments and programs also given by France, that's for sure, but it's a private investment that has been made, and it's a very large one, very visible. Everybody in Ukraine knows about it. So yes, what we represent is a business that is there. And then we as a chamber, our role is to bring more people to come to Ukraine, of course, more members for us, and also for a larger presence of French businesses in Ukraine. And this is through all what we do in terms of communicating, the webinars. This week I had a conference with the ambassador of France in Ukraine and the Economic Commission to show exactly what France is doing, what the programs are, in order to facilitate the investment into Ukraine. We are promoting this as much as we can because it's in our own interest to grow. Thank you.
Yes, of course, on the other question. It's a very long story, but I will make it very short. There was an idea of reorganization of ministries in Ukraine. And the point of this idea was how to attract highly talented and highly qualified individuals with the best competencies to public administration, and especially how to attract them from this surrounding consultancy environment, which is the Ukraine reform architecture, the external consultants which support the ministries in their analysis and policy making. And I said before that there's too much dependency on that. That was the idea, and yes, to a large extent it failed because it was not implemented in a proper way. It will still have to be implemented. It only encompassed a few pilot ministries, and even in those pilot ministries it didn't go as it was actually meant. So the big challenge is really how to attract people who are highly talented and who are now, for example, either abroad or in Ukraine and employed by international companies or consultancies or technical assistance projects and so on, and earn much better money, honestly. How to make sure, how to create circumstances that would attract them to the public administration. That would be. And якщо дозволено, на кінці я хотів би подякувати вам на запрошенні і побажати вам успіху і миру.
Thank you so much, first of all, to our panelists for participation. It was very interesting to talk with you about actually the topics that intersect so much: reconstruction, European integration with our building capabilities, and making sure that the governance structures are fit to do the reconstruction projects and European integration process. So it's very useful, and thanks for the questions. We would like to close then on this note, this panel, and I would like to pass the word to the closing remarks to my colleagues, Romano Quignou and also Hélène Vanna from the PGA. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for still being here. We have no medal for you, but we are really glad that that number of people stayed. It proves that our discussions are relevant, and we really thank you once again for being here. I will try to be quick, especially that's the second time of the day that I'm speaking. It's already too much. But first of all, I would really like to thank Monsieur le Député for hosting us here. That has been a very weirdly shaped room. We can say that, a bit too hot. But at least it was huge, and this proves that we have a lot of people interested in discussion, and that's great. So thanks a lot to Monsieur Petit and the Assemblée Nationale. thanks a lot to our partners here. We are really proud to start this cooperation with Professional Government of Association of Ukraine, and we hope that it's only the beginning of a beautiful story. And thanks a lot also to Konrad Adenauer Stiftung. As a French, I'm really jealous that they have this foundation, because I think this is very important to have this foundation, and that's my personal belief. I think that our foreign policy has been lacking such instruments. We will not have this is not how we function, but we lack it. And many countries should get inspired of having such foundation. On behalf of Euro Creative, we are very happy to be here. We were very happy to have this discussion, especially that it was one of the discussion part of what we are doing at the moment about Ukraine. We have small needs, we have small capacities, we are not many. We are NGO in French, which means it's hell, but we try to do what we can, and we hope that we can be helpful. And please reach out to us, let us know how we can help, what we can do for you, what we can do with you, and if we can be helpful, if we can be useful, we will be very happy about this. This month is quite big on our own scale. When it comes to Ukraine, we will have a visit of a delegation from members of Parliament of the Rada here in Paris, in the National Assembly, in 10 days, led by Oleg Dunda, who is the president of the Franco-Ukrainian Friendship Group. We will have also the same week an event which will be organized also with IFRI and with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs about the Black Sea security, about the European strategic autonomy, and Ukraine will play a big role in this conference. So to prove that we really have a number of events in the coming weeks. Also a delegation from Ukraine when it comes to agriculture, and this is very important topic also here, a very challenging topic when it comes to European integration of Ukraine, when it comes to Franco-Ukrainian relations, and we need to find these topics where we can engage dialogue and prove that it's not only about challenges, but it's also about the opportunities, and we can find together solutions. Okay, we will have some fights when it comes to agriculture, that's for sure. Don't get me wrong, we will have some problems, but also, we can find creative solutions. Creative solution when you talk about Ukraine is, for example, to talk about food security, how France and Ukraine can cooperate when it comes to food security and stability of Middle East, of North Africa, etc., etc. So I think I will skip the second part of my talk because it will be again 5-10 minutes, and nobody wants that, especially me. But I think that I would just like to conclude by saying, and I think that Monsieur Elbron said it, it's basically we should not be naive, and to maintain the support of France means that we need to maintain the attention of French people. That's not easy, I know, but we need to find solutions. As a French citizen, I think that French support has been surprisingly positive. It was not the same in 2014 during Maidan, because French society, French political class was not able to say who is the good guy, who is the bad guy. That was quite bad. 10 years later, I think that we are able to do that. It's a small victory. I understand that some people in this room would say, it's just normal, to have this. It's not evident. And we made a big step there. But we need to continue and to reinforce this. The problem that we have here, I think, in France, is that we have a political instability. We have a political time that is focused on short-term issues, on short-term fights, which means that it's a lot about political communication. It's a lot about looking at the polling and trying to satisfy the part of the electorate. And this is the trap, because we are on the same side. Ukraine, France, Europe, we cannot provide, we cannot just be on the short term. We need the long term. We need the long-term vision, we need the long-term actions and not just talks. And this is on this that I would like to end. We need to convince our populations in France and elsewhere. In Ukraine it's the case, but in France especially, that we might have some suffering on the short term, and suffering is a small word for us, but we might have some problems, challenges in the short term, but we need to face them to have long-term opportunities and gains. Because by sacrificing a bit of the short term, we will make sure that the long term will be prosperous, will be secure, will be democratic for us. If not, we will face big problems, but we will face them together. So thanks a lot. Let us know how to help, and have a nice evening that will be prolonged by a cocktail all together. Thank you very much.
Good evening, dear ladies and gentlemen. I have not spoken yet, so I will briefly represent myself. My name is Hélène Vanna, and I'm from the organizing team, as you understand, from the side of PGA. And first of all, I want to thank you as well on my side and from PGA and our organizers for coming here, for being here with us. We appreciate your interest in Ukraine and in the topic that we are discussing here. Also, a big thank you to our partners, EuroCreative, Konrad Adenauer Foundation, and to the deputies for hosting our event and this remarkable place. As some of you might know, or you have understood throughout the conference, that there are at least 3 events taking place on Ukraine today in Paris. One in the morning in the DG Finance in Bercy, one in Élysée that saw several of our high-level speakers, and our conference. So what does it tell us? Is Ukraine in fashion? Well, yes, kind of. But the most important message is that this topic about Ukraine, about security, about European security, and about the future of Europe, both as a geopolitical power and a strong economic union, is vital now, indeed. That's why we gathered at this conference and we wanted to have a professional discussion. The world is changing fast. There are new technologies and new media that overcome borders, titles and laws. Ultimately, anyone can have a voice today. And we do not know if it is the voice of an expert or of a dilettante, of a friend or of an enemy, and if it is lying or telling the truth. So on top of that, as we can see it, geopolitically the world is reshaping very fast too. We are witnessing it right now, even through some secret charts in Signal that are suddenly published in newspapers. And so the so-called wake-up call ran, and it was actually an alarm. So now it is time to define our values, to protect the pillars of our European Asian civilization. It is now time in Europe to choose dignity and courage. Before Russian attack on the 24th of February, more than 3 years ago, the majority believed that Ukraine would fall just in a couple of days, that it was impossible for Ukraine to fight Russia in a direct military conflict. But Ukrainians did not know that it was impossible, so they fought. On February 28, 2022, New York Times published, a couple days after the beginning of the war, "I thought I knew what bravery was, and then I saw Ukraine." Since then, there have been multiple examples of heroism of Ukrainian people during the war. But in reality, it is not something new in Ukrainian history. It is a mode of being. It is a mode of being Ukrainian. It is a very French approach too, to the best of my knowledge. Not to believe in impossibility. Impossible n'est pas français. Impossible is not French, many times said Napoleon, and not only him. So mindset and courage to dare, they determine success or failure to a much bigger extent than circumstances. A lot was said about this during the first panel, political will. This is what we need, and then we will succeed. I think many of you will agree with this, and I'm kindly asking you to become advocates for strong democratic Europe with its own security system, with a powerful economy, and side by side with Ukraine. Please share information about the importance of current choice that Europe faces today. Speak about it in your circles. We have representatives from different embassies, and we have people here from different origins, from different countries. Please talk about it in your countries, in your families, with your friends. Strong democratic Europe is needed not only for Europeans, The entire world needs it. And it is important that European people understand the stakes, a high historical importance of time we live in now. We didn't choose this time, but we are in, so we should adapt. This journey will be long and often breathtaking, and the path starts with Ukraine. Slava Ukraini! Vive la France et vive l'Europe!